Hey, Podcast America. Welcome to episode 18 of the Enlightened Neanderthals podcast. And before we get into show notes, as always, we're going to talk Allegiance Holsters. They are a small family-owned business in North Carolina, and they make all of your molded Kydex range holsters and inside the waistband concealed carry holsters. And they also have the individual first aid kits, IFAKs, for sale. And if you've listened to more than a couple or more than one of our latest episodes, you'll know I say that you should have a handful of these things kicking around your house, in your glove box, in your backpack, etc. Check them out at allegianceholsters.com and use code TNW10 at checkout to save you a little bit. This episode, we had a guest, Brent Weir, who is a veteran of the nuclear submarine naval force. Is that what you would call that? I don't even know. As well as a 20-year firefighter here locally. I thought it was a really interesting episode, just hearing about how life works on a nuclear submarine when you're underway. What did he say, like 60 days they'd been underwater at one point?
I believe 50s. It was 58. 58 days they spent out, I believe.
Submerged, not just out on the ocean, but 58 days submerged straight. And then he's
at a depth that we aren't sure of.
Right. Yeah. Undisclosed. And then he has been a fireman for 20 years, was fired for refusing the COVID vaccine, and then recently rehired. So he has an interesting story to tell, and I hope you guys all enjoy this episode. All right, we're live, and we are here in studio on the mats. We've got my friend Brent. Can we say your last name, or do you prefer to keep it out?
Whatever.
Brent,
keep it out.
Let's give him a fake name.
Yeah.
Brent Yellow.
Brent Yellow.
Brent Yellow.
Hey, who you calling yellow?
So Brent is in studio with us here on the in the mat room, and this should be a fun conversation because he's had some pretty interesting life experience. But he was what was your specific role on the submarine?
I was a nuclear power plant mechanical operator.
Okay, so is it fair to say technician?
Yeah, well, you're standing watch, you're running all the machinery, running the equipment, and doing all the maintenance on it. So
okay,
and power plant, propulsion plant operator.
Yeah, okay.
Smartest person in the room,
right?
Yeah, well, no. I wasn't the smartest, but
Well, you are now.
You are tonight, brother.
Welcome to the bedroom.
No.
And so then you went from there into the fire service for a large metropolitan fire department for 20 years, and so we've got a lot of things to talk about there with the way society, just kind of like our conversation with Fireman Dave, talking about the way society is devolving and what we're placing on our first responders, forcing them to deal with it. And then you were fired for not taking the COVID vaccine, correct?
That is correct.
All right. So we've got a lot to talk about. But before we do, where are you from, Brent? Where did you grow up around here?
Yep. Grew up in Snohomish County, Everett area. Yeah, and went to high school here and married my high school sweetheart. Actually, we met before high school.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah, my lovely wife, Dana, and she's awesome. I don't care if people know my last name. They can figure it out. They're going to figure out, whatever. I have nothing to hide. But, so we got married, and when I was in the Navy, actually, we'd kind of separated a little bit, and she was at Wazoo going to school, and I was like, man, why'd I let her go? So I started tracking her down, and she had a boyfriend and was like, talk to the hand. And I was like, oh, no. But I got my foot back in the door. And so we got married and had our first baby down in San Diego. And then we've had to have 4 total kids. And the youngest has just finished her first year down at UW. And so, I got a wonderful family. We've been married over 30 years now. So
awesome, man.
Nice. Congratulations.
That's really cool.
It's a lot of work.
Okay, so what year did you join the Navy?
So I joined right after high school. So I didn't have a lot of direction. I was trying to, figure out what I wanted to do in life. And both my mom and dad had kind of gotten remarried and had kind of lives going on, new lives. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had a stepdad that had been in the Navy. So he was like, why don't you go in the Navy? I'm like, okay. So he took me down and he had an idea of what he thought I should do, but started talking to the recruiter, and he was a nuke machinist mate on submarines. So guess what I ended up doing?
Yeah.
I was a nuke machinist mate on submarines, right? So
what year was this?
So this is 1987.
Okay.
So right after high school, I went on a fishing boat up to Alaska for the summer and then fished down here in the Puget Sound a little bit and Didn't know what I wanted. I had 2 classes. I was going to go to Bellevue Community College, and I had a volleyball class and a math class. And I like, this says, I don't know where I'm going. And
please tell me volleyball was co-ed.
Yeah, probably. But I didn't
that's
make
why
it
you go to college.
I didn't make it there.
That's such the track of so many kids coming out of high school, though. Just like my hand, like I don't have any direction.
What do I do
I
with
don't know where
hands?
I'm going to go.
Yeah.
You know, and I signed up for 2 classes, or it ended up being 1 class, but yeah, it was
Where was
just
that
volleyball. No math.
It wasn't. It was what was it? The government and the media, and it was 1 combined class for 8 hours a day.
Well, they've
that would
combined
be a hell of a
lately, so
class.
you know
Yeah,
they're
right now,
they're ahead of their time.
2023.
Now it'd be a hell of a class.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
in 2008, I was ready to get the hell
drown
out of there.
yourself.
But you kind of had the same thing, and you had. So when you went to the Navy, you went and did your test to find out how smart you were, and nukes are pretty smart cookies.
Yeah. You know, you take the ASVAB test back then, and they pretty much say, oh, yeah, you can kind of do anything you want, and the military has to offer. And so, yeah, the thing with the nuclear power is that it was like a 75% attrition rate in the school. So they'd put, 500 people in, and they'd get 125 that would actually graduate, or
And you went-
whatever that. What's 25% of that? Or
To
100?
North Carolina then for that?
No, I was in Florida.
Oh, you were in Florida.
So that base is totally gone now. I went to boot camp, A school and nuclear power school in Orlando, and then went up to Idaho. So that was about a year going through all of that. And then Idaho Falls was where we did our prototype reactor plant. So they have a big mock-up of a submarine engine room.
Yeah.
And you show them that, hey, I can actually qualify, because they don't want to send you out to a sub and have you have to try to qualify, with the pressure on.
Underway.
And now this guy can't do it. He can't perform under pressure.
Yep.
So they got to make sure you can actually do it before they even send you to the sub. So it's 2 years before you even get onto a boat.
Was that a 4-year enlistment, or did you have to
6
sign
years.
up?
No, it's 6.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you have
you're
to
2
sign up
years
for
of
extra
training
time.
in school. Yeah.
Okay.
So your job, I mean, are you technically learning how to contain a nuclear sub? Sounds real cool, but technically, isn't it just steam? You're creating steam power.
Yeah. I mean, you're
you're
a
learning
mechanic.
how to keep a
Well, the
core
reactor. You also have the
cool,
reactor.
right? So
Yes.
so in a confined space, what you're being taught is how, like a Chernobyl event, we have a bad event. We need to keep this situation stable. You're learning how to keep the core cool in a very confined environment. I think that's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, no, and the interesting thing too is that if you think about it, you're taking 20, 21, 22-year-old young men, and I think they got gals doing it now, but back then it was all guys that are running nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
And very, very, very few accidents.
Oh my God.
Now granted, the first submarine I was on, the first sub in that class actually sank. So
I went.
we
down
can talk
rabbit
about that,
hole
but
yesterday.
but that wasn't because of the nuclear reactor or anything. It didn't have anything to do with the nuclear part of it. But
let's get there.
But yeah,
what I was going to ask is, in the mid '80s, was it widely known that we were using nuclear reactors on submarines? Was that old news?
Oh
Or was
yeah,
that
yeah.
still a
No,
secret?
we didn't even have. I think we had maybe a couple when I got in. I think there's maybe a couple diesel boats left. But
Okay.
the boat I got on in 1987 was a 30-year-old boat.
Yeah.
And,
So
and
you
while
sent
I
me-
was on board, it got decommissioned.
Okay.
And then I went to another boat, and then that was a 30-year-old boat. And when I got done with my enlistment, right when I got done, is they had decommissioned that one as well. So I was at the very tail end of those boats. So yeah, that technology's been around a long time.
Okay. So let's go back to the machine room, or the reactor room.
Yeah.
What are your daily tasks if you're working in the reactor room on a submarine?
So back then, and I don't think it's changed too much. But you got to remember too, this is from 87 to 93. But
Sure.
but so on a sub, so I was on the 612 and the 662. So I was in a 594 class and a 637 class. But you had 3 types of nuclear trained enlisted guys. So you had the mechanics, the electricians, and the electronics technicians. So ETs, EMs, and the MMs. The mechanics took care of everything mechanical. So we were the ones that turned the wrenches. We did all the maintenance on stuff. We ran the main engines, the turbine generators. We made all the water. We purified all the lube oil. We took care of the air compressors, stuff like that. And then you had the electricians, and they went around and they took care of all the motors. So there'd be a pump that would pump seawater. Well, we'd take care of the pump and the casing and all the mechanical parts of it. Electricians would deal with all the wiring.
Yep.
And then you had the ETs, who are the electronics technicians, and they're the ones that focused on the reactor controls. So there was a whole machinery space that just had these cabinets full of electronic. And now, granted, this is going to be 50s technology at the time, but we always thought 1950s technology
and
today.
Analog needles and buttons and the big control cabinet just
that's
chock
what
full
would
of wire.
work now.
But those are the guys that took care of the reactor controls stuff. And so anything that had to do with, because there's a lot to a nuclear reactor as far as, powering it up, powering it down, making sure you're controlling all the parameters that are going on inside the reactor. So those are the three different types. And then you'd have the engineering officer. He's the officer in charge of all the engineering spaces. And then you'd have, and so then controlling the boat, we had an engine room upper level and engine room lower level, machinery space upper level, machinery space lower level, watches on duty. This is when we're undersea and cruising along through the ocean. An engine room supervisor that roamed around. That was what I ended up doing. And then you'd have three guys that sat in the maneuvering room. And you might see those control panels, and it's got throttles. It's got the reactor plant control panel and the electrical plant control panel. And so you had an electrician sitting there, an ET sitting there, and another EM sitting over there. And so you see Hunt for Red October, and you see like two or three guys, and they're driving the boat. Movies. Total baloney. There's no way that three guys can run a submarine. You've got so many people doing things like from the control room of the sub. You can't even. There's no gas pedal up there.
Yeah.
Like when they ring a head flank, right? They ring the little thing up. Well, a little signal goes to that room, and then that guy has to physically. Looks like a giant wheel of a ship, right? He has the reverse and the forward. He literally has to turn a hand wheel that mechanically links to some valves that let steam into the turbines.
Okay.
So that's the gas pedal on a submarine.
Yeah.
Is opening this thing up. And there's a lot to it, right? I mean, because when you start drawing steam off, all the temperatures start changing.
Oh, yeah.
All the way that the nuclear reaction is happening changes. They got to change the way the control rods are up and down. So there's a lot of stuff that happens, and it takes a lot of people to run one.
So who's in charge of the reactor and the control rods?
That'd be the engineering officer of the watch.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
so he's an engineer. He's an officer, and he's sitting there behind these three enlisted guys.
Yeah.
And he's making sure he's ultimately responsible at that moment.
Got it.
To make sure and just like there's there's an officer of the deck who's in the control room you guys see in the movies, right, where he's got the periscope and stuff, right? So you got another officer there that's standing behind the guys that actually steer the boat and make it go up and down, and all that. So,
okay.
Do you know the type of fuel that was used in the rods?
It's like uranium-238.
That's what you guys, yeah?
Yeah, that's
Just
what it
standard,
is.
yep.
Yeah, it's not. And so my boats are long decommissioned.
Yeah.
Technically, I couldn't, some of these things I couldn't talk about back in the day, and probably there might be somebody that might say you shouldn't talk
it's
about
all
that.
open source.
You can go to any book now, and especially since they're all razor blades now, the boats I was on. So there's so much more technology than what I.
Do you have any idea what they do with the reactor when they decommission the boat?
Yeah. So what they do is the reactors, if you think about the sub, a big long tube, the reactor compartment is one big giant section in the middle, and it has a tunnel that goes through. So forward of the reactor compartment, anybody can kind of go up in those areas. But you can't even, like if you bring visitors down or even other people from the tender, from the shipyard, they technically can't go past the reactor compartment because that stuff was all confidential. Okay. So unless somebody had the need to know, then you couldn't go back there. But that whole section of where the reactor compartment's at has a tunnel that you go through with doors. But they just cut that out of the center of the sub. They weld the sub back together, and they send that up to get recycled. And then they take that reactor compartment and ship it out to, I think it's in Idaho.
I was just going to say,
but it's
Indonesia
out in the desert.
In the ocean.
No, it's out in the desert. I think it's Idaho. You can look at it. I mean, Google it. I forget where it's at. I've seen the pictures of it. They dig a huge hole in the ground, and they just line these old reactor compartments up.
No shit.
And then eventually they just bury them. Because it's all about time, distance, and shielding, right? As far as being resisting.
What's shielding for them? Dirt?
Well, yeah.
Like, isn't in Hanford they put them in glass? It's because they think it's better containment.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. I'm not sure.
Right.
Yeah, but for that, the reactor. So there's multiple layers of protection there, right? You've got the reactor core. The rods are all down inside there, so there's no reactivity going on. It's shut down. It's cold.
It's like a dead reaction.
Yeah, and then it's in a shielded, this HY80 steel is like, a foot thick, super steel. And then it's in a big hole in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And then eventually they just bury it, so nobody's getting affected by that.
Yeah. It's just weird to think we have stuff buried.
No, I know, dude.
Because what's the half-life on that?
Some
of it, like 100,000 years for the half-life. And you're like, Jesus Christ.
But it's just like all our trash, right? Where does all our trash go?
Yeah, into the ground.
Yeah.
Landfills, man. I think about that. I'm just like.
Yeah, unbelievable.
At least they become nice golf courses.
Exactly. It's a park.
Yeah.
Mommy, what's that flame venting out of the ground?
It's your eternal flame of truth.
Yeah, that's right. It's profit. Okay, so when you sent me the ship numbers last night, and the first thing I saw was that the Guardfish was a Thresher class sub. So I looked up Thresher class subs, and that immediately took me down the route of the very first Thresher class
Lost
sub.
at sea.
Yeah, was the USS Thresher that went down with all men aboard lost at sea.
120 some
So
guys. Yeah.
Joining the Navy, and actually, what year was the Scorpion? That had to have been right before you joined too.
The Scorpion was earlier. Yeah, I
like 83
head.
maybe.
Yeah.
So that had to be in your mind when you're joining up to.
Well, you hear about those things when you're going through school and stuff, but they go through and they say, okay, this is why that happened, and then here's what we learned from that, and here's the changes that we made from that. To be frank, I was flipping 19 years old, dude. I wasn't thinking about much. I was thinking about, well, how many days till I get out of the Navy, or what.
Yeah.
What girl do I want to ask out on a date next week?
Yeah, 100%.
How much money am I going to make?
I'm going to have some more basic questions for you here.
Oh, man.
You're a tall guy. And I thought subs were like a bunch of small dudes. I didn't think they were I thought there was really tight, compact spaces. Was that rough or what?
There's a lot of compact spaces, but you get used to it, right? Like anything else, you kind of adapt. And so I remember one story that's kind of funny. We had a guy come down from the shipyard that was there to work on a pump. And so they said, hey, Weir, go forward. That's my last name now. You got it. Go forward and meet the guy from the shipyard as he comes down the hatch, and then bring him back here. I'm like, okay, cool. So I go down. There's a hatch that opens up, the main one where you crawl down into the sub. There's a ladder there that swings out of the way when we go undersea. But so he comes down the ladder. I'm like, hey, follow me. And so I go down, I go up some steps, crawl through a watertight hatch, go through the tunnel, crawl through another hatch, down some steps, go down. And I turn around and I go, where did the guy go? Yeah. I'm like, shoot, I hope I didn't lose him. And I go walking back. And he's like crawling through the first hatch, like trying to get through this hatch. And you just get so good at getting through them. Like this hatch might be only like 3 feet by 2 feet. It's got a little bar on top, and you get to the point where you grab the bar, you shoot your legs through, and your head ducks under, and it's just kind of muscle memory.
All nimble.
So your first couple of weeks, you got a lot of cuts and bumps on your head, but after that, the muscle memory, it's not a lot. It's not very big, right?
What was the longest you guys were ever? Oh, sorry. What was the longest you were ever underway on a sub?
59 days without coming to the surface.
Were people still smoking on the boats back then?
Yeah. So what they could do back then?
That's wild.
This is hilarious, dude. This is hilarious. They called it the smoking lamp, right? Yeah. If the smoking lamp's lit, that means that you can light up. And so when we were underway, right? If you think about it, you only got a certain amount of oxygen, and so there's a whole bunch of ways that we get oxygen, make oxygen, scrub the CO2 out of the air. But so they couldn't smoke. But then when we were ventilating, they would light the smoking lamp. So ventilating is when you come up to the surface, and the snorkel goes up, and it's this big mass thing that goes up, and a valve opens up, and they turn on this huge high pressure blower, and it circulates fresh air through the boat, right?
Yeah, it's got to feel so good.
So as soon as they said, okay, commence ventilation, smoking lamp is lit. Well, then you'd had 15, 20 guys all just chain smoking as fast as they could. So when you're supposed to be getting the fresh air, that's when this haze of smoke just started permeating through the boat. You're just like, come on, man.
I'm negative 1.5 packs of Camel non-filters. I got to get through these.
Yeah. And then they'd be like, okay, secure ventilation, smoking lamps out. And everybody's like sucking down their last one. And they shut the valve. And I was like, come on, man. Did that do any good?
I got a question for when you're underwater for an extended period of time. And in a lot of military, so much emphasis is put on for PT, physical exercise and stuff.
Yeah.
How do you stay, limber, strong when you're in these small confined spaces? What do they do to make sure your body's being maintained adequately?
No,
Give you cigarettes when the vents open.
yeah.
Here's a hard pack. Yeah.
You do laps back and forth down the hall, 4 steps that way, 4 steps that way. No, so what we would do is we would like pack when we do a long deployment, we'd pack because it was just short stuff, if you're just going out for a week or a couple of days or whatever, then you just deal with it, right? Yeah. But you could always do body weight stuff. Like there'd be guys that were, and I worked out with another guy that was a friend of mine, but we do pull-ups and push-ups and sit-ups,
prison
like that.
kind of work.
Yeah, body weight stuff. But then if we did a long underway, they'd find a little area, and we had a rowing machine back in it's called Shaft Alley, and it was back towards behind the reduction gears, and there was this little area where you could walk, and we just had a rowing machine there, and so you could actually sit and use a rowing machine. And then in one of the machinery spaces or electrical spaces up, they put a exercise bike in there, so they just had it crammed in among some of the other stuff. Oh, and we had a Versa climber. So coming into the engine room, there's the hatch in the back. That's the rear hatch. And so there's, the bell, like when you see the SEALs and the divers, and they would lock in and lock out. Yeah. So there's a hatch on top, then this pressure bell, and then a hatch on the bottom, and then there's a little ladder coming down. Well, when you're underway, nobody's going up and down that ladder, so we mounted a Versa climber there so you could sit. But the thing that sucked is you'd be trying to work out, and if you're on the surface, those boats roll a lot. So I can remember trying to row one time, and I'm rocking back and forth, and I'm like, this sucks. I feel like I'm really rowing. For real. Yeah. But yeah, so we did what we could.
Improvising. Felt like would be
the worst was on the spec op which is your special op, which is the long deployment. But other than that, if it's just a 2-week in and out, you just dealt with it.
Because I feel like to be under for what did you say was your longest?
59 days.
So I mean, not only is that the better your body is physically, you can handle a more intense situation. But then mentally, how do you maintain normalcy or like? I'm not claustrophobic, but I imagine if I stayed in a confined, if I stayed in my house for that amount of time, I would struggle.
Yeah.
Did you ever notice or face, or you had so much of a team and you had a job and you're working together?
Oh yeah.
It never kind of entered your mind.
Well, one thing is you're highly trained. I mean, they train you a lot, and so when it comes to like the casualties, so biggest thing is. The worst thing that could happen is is you get flooding, like a pipe breaks, or you get a steam line rupture, or you get a fire. If you get a fire on a submarine, guess what? There's no place for that smoke to go. Instantly, it just gets pitch black in there. Yeah. So just for an example, in a fire, you had to know one of the things they train you on is they have these masks, and the mask goes on your face, rubber mask. Hose goes down to a little regulator that mounts on your belt, and then you have a little hose with a fitting. And then throughout the sub, there's little manifolds with quick releases, just like, on your air compressor for your nail gun. And there'd be these manifolds throughout the sub. And you had to know where every single one of them was. Yeah. Because you had to be able to go from one end of the boat to the other, blacked out mask, holding your breath between. So like if there was a fire, there wasn't enough. They call them OBAs. It's kind of like the modern day firefighters, SCBAs. It's a tank. It's different, but it's a tank that gives you your own air where you can move around. But that was just for the firefighters.
Like a rebreather?
Everybody else, this was called an OBA, oxygen breathing apparatus, and it had a chemical reaction that made oxygen.
Oh, nice.
It's kind of interesting. Oh. But so for most everybody else, you had your mask, and you'd find a manifold, and you'd plug in, and you'd sit there. And somebody can come running up to you, and they could plug into yours, and you might have 6 or 7 guys standing there. And the guy's like, okay, I need to head to my damage control station. So he'd 1, 2, 3, he'd hold his breath, unplug, go booking down the hallway, and find the next one and plug in. Damn. So you had to be able to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And so they train you on that. And so when you train on stuff, it's just like anything else, right? You train to shoot, move, communicate. You train in jiu-jitsu, right, to fight. And then when you actually have a real fight, that training just kicks right in, and you've already done the repetitions, and it's not too hard to do.
Training is a factor, but then sometimes when you're in it, it can be overwhelming. Or like, oh my God, this isn't what I thought
Well, yeah,
it would.
and it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, it's not for everybody, and that's why, you know, like say nuclear power school, we, you know, when there's guys that weren't nuclear trained, that were on subs too, and they had to go through submarine damage control school, or I think not, what was it called? I forget, because we didn't go through it as nukes, because they said, well, you guys, we're not going to put you through this, but other guys that weren't nuclear trained, they'd make them, you've seen in the videos or what you may have seen online or something.
Like the firefighting.
Yeah, they put them in a room, and all of a sudden water starts spraying out, and the water starts filling up, and they have to run over and put a band clamp on it and figure it out, and another thing might be leaking, and this thing's filling with water, and a lot of guys would just panic and freak out, and they couldn't do it. And so if you couldn't pass that training, then they just wouldn't let you on there.
Smart.
Yeah.
Totally. Dang. How was the food?
It was kind of cool on subs. We got better food than the rest of the Navy.
That's what I've heard.
It's kind of like we want to treat you guys a little better. So we'd have steak and lobster once in a while, and yeah, it was pretty nice. Yeah,
I'm joining the Navy, boys. I'll see you.
But I will say, at one
Ice
point,
cream every night.
we were coming back in, and for 2 days, all we had was Jello and pickles
Oh, jeez.
because they had ran out. And that's the thing, right? Those boats can stay out for unlimited
as long
time.
As the humans can survive.
Unlimited time, right? We made our own water. We could make our own oxygen. We could get rid of the CO2. We could, you know, but it was the human factor that was there, right? It was not carrying enough food to take care of a crew. So
no one ever brings a fishing pole, and you're like, let's
That's
pop
what we
up
should
for
do,
a
right?
minute or two. I mean, here,
grow some microgreens and a little
kelp. Come
Yeah.
on, absolutely.
But that was the thing. So
So then, being in the service at the end of the Cold War there, did you guys ever do any of the floats where you're sneaking into like Vladivostok or into actually, were you in the Atlantic or the
no,
Pacific?
I was Westpac. So yeah.
So did you ever,
Vladivostok, I may or may not have seen that through the
periscope?
through a periscope. Well, not Vladivostok, but you know,
another
a bunch of
port.
trees on a shore, and they said, "Yeah, that's Russia." Oh, okay.
All right.
But we did have one pretty cool time where we were over there, and there was a Russian military exercise going on. So there was actually ships and helicopters and things in the air.
Nice.
And we came up, and they actually came up. We came up to periscope depth and had video. So there was time we were, you know, guys would, so you see on a 6-hour watch. So you'd be on watch for 6 hours, and then some guy, the next guy would eat his food, come back and relieve you. You'd go up and eat your food, and then go to bed or work or whatever. But we were sitting there in cruise mess eating, and they'd have the videos of missiles getting fired off of Russian ships and stuff, and helicopters flying over, and it was pretty cool. So we felt pretty sneaky.
In a situation like that, are submarines, I mean, I feel like they're versatile in that they can be used for like reconnaissance and information gathering because you're underwater and it's a little harder to see. But then also that same element of surprise gives you a decent ability to attack and be unknown.
Yeah, well, that was the whole thing, right? During the Cold War, as a cat and mouse, right? They had their ballistic missile submarines, right? We had our ballistic missile submarines, and it's the mutually assured destruction, right? To where, hey, you guys mess with us, we're going to nuke you. Oh, yeah, well, we'll nuke you. Okay, well, let's not nuke each other. Okay. You know, you respected each other as peace through strength, right? Yeah. And so they called us a strategic deterrent, right? It's like you knew, they knew that ballistic missile sub coming right out of Bangor was cruising off and down, you know, and had missiles aimed right at, you know, Moscow and Vladivostok and, you know, all these different places. And so so what they would do is their fast attack boats would try to find our missile boats. In our fast attack boats, which was what I did, we tried to track their ballistic missile subs, because if we could hang out off the coast there near one of their bases, and then we could catch one of their ballistic missile subs leaving.
Coming out of the pen. That's right. I watched Hunt for Red
and
October.
if we could, that's right. And if we could sneak up behind them and then follow them without them knowing we're there, well, shoot, if all of a sudden they say, yeah, it's going down, they're going to launch missiles, we shoot a torpedo and take them out. And boom, we've saved how many hundreds of thousands of lives?
Denver.
Wow.
Yeah, whatever. So that was the thing they were trying to do. They were doing it to us, and we were doing it to them for a lot. That was the main thing. So our spec op was cruising around in a box, trying to find one of their ballistic missile subs coming out so that we could track them.
Did you guys ever have any tense moments with Russian subs? Kind of
not Russian subs. I'd tell you, but I'd have to kill you. But no. But we did have off the coast of Thailand, we were there, and I don't know. I'm not sure what nation it was. That had a boat, but it was like a patrol boat that actually shot at our sub.
Oh shit!
We were on the surface cruising along, and some heavy cal machine gun shot at our sub. And from what I can't confirm this, and I was kind of just a lowly mechanic in the engine room, but from what I was told was that we were able to do some kind of maneuvers to where we swept the tail of the boat out and took out this patrol boat somehow by maneuvering towards it or something. But there was big chips, and it didn't even dent the metal. It chipped the paint, but you could see these heavy caliber machine gun rounds on there. It was like, what the heck? Who's firing? I don't know if they're pirates or what it was.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a lot of the details on that. But yeah, there was that. And then another kind of exciting well, it wasn't even exciting, but we followed some drug lord on a sailboat for a while, tracked him. So just getting to your point is that, being pretty stealthy. I mean, he had no idea he had a nuclear submarine tracking him.
That couldn't have been like a mission of the Navy. What was that? Like the Coast Guard was like,
or the CIA. It might have been the CIA's boat.
Who knows back then, dude? It was like, hey, follow this sailboat until we can get to you. And
the agency wants you to provide security for this boat full of cargo.
Who do you think was eating better, steak and lobster underwater, or the drug lord on his yacht?
That one was above my pay grade at the time, but
that's cool.
So, there's interesting stuff.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
What's the depth that you guys go down to?
Well, we could go down, it used to be greater than 400 feet and in excess of 20 knots. That's the best I can tell you.
Classified for most boats.
Say it might be between like 1299 and 1301, something like that.
That is crazy.
I don't know, roughly.
What do you think the surface pressure on the hull is at that depth?
Well, how you do
It's
the math,
thousands of
right?
pounds per square inch.
1,300 feet divided by 33 feet per atmosphere, right? Was it 14.7
Yeah,
PSI?
it's that simple math. Carry the one.
Yeah, somebody pull their phone out.
You said, all right, what did you say, 1,300 divided by what?
Well, so divided by 33. So it's 33 feet per atmosphere, right?
Okay.
Hope I'm doing this right. Somebody would put in the comments, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And then, so what does that come out to?
39.39.
Times 14.7.
579. Is that pounds?
That must be PSI. That'd be PSI.
Okay. That's actually
What's
less than I thought it would be.
atmospheric? 14.
14.7.
Yeah.
PSI. So, but you think, but one thing we used to do is we would, when we knew we were going down to test depth, right? So that's our test depth. So we didn't do that very often. Normally you just cruise down 400 feet. You just cruising, you're plenty deep, right? But it's like, what's the deepest we need to go? So we would do that test. And so, everybody's up and, watching and, and people are, walking around and checking pipes and looking, making sure nothing's leaking.
Is the boat growing?
And they would
like
incrementally,
creaking?
well, what we'd do is in the lower level of the engine room, we'd tie a string across.
Oh my God.
And so then as the boat went down,
Surface this bitch, get me out.
the string started dropping, man, and it would drop like a foot.
Yep.
Dude. And when we'd get down low and they just do incremental, they'd drop, another 1,500 feet, 1,500 feet. And everybody's checking and looking at stuff because, they're making sure that, hey, we don't want nothing bad to happen.
Holy shit.
And then they're, okay, we're going to go back up. So then we'd tighten the string back up. And by the time we got up halfway up, it would break the string. So
Whose idea was that?
that was just fun. We knew that
this thing's gonna.
we knew the hull was compressing,
Wow.
So do you use a particular, or is this, can you speak about this? Do they use a particular type of alloy or something that has, it can flex and
Of the steel?
while
it's
still
like,
maintaining
I
strength.
think it was called HY80, I think is what you probably Google it
The
and get
alloy.
more. You could probably get more information on Google than I could give you being there, just because back then, but it's a super high. But then, and that's just for the sub, the hull and everything. But then we start getting into the reactor plant stuff, the Inconel valves and stuff, and the Monel, these different high. I mean, these valves, they would here we are, these 20-year-old guys, and they're like, hey, this valve you're working on is worth $35,000. Well, that was a lot back then, right? Yeah. But this one little valve, so don't cross thread it.
Oh shit. Yeah.
No, you'd get guys that would
Give me that impact wrench. I'm going to drive this bitch home.
Yeah. No, you never use impact wrenches. You couldn't use cheater bars on anything, But we did have one incident where we're cruising across the Pacific and we're on our way to Japan. So we'd leave San Diego and we'd head to Japan. It'd take you a couple weeks. So we're cruising over there and they're like, we're having problems with the evaporator working and there's a valve on there that's bad. And so the evaporator is 8,000 gallon per day steam distilling plant. So that's where all our water came from on the boat. So this is a pretty important piece of equipment. And so my job was to work on the valves and stuff on it. Well, we're trying to do this work, and we couldn't get the nuts off of the yoke on it to do the maintenance the stuff on it. They're like, we need to fix this. And they're like, well, we need to get it done. And I'm like, we can't get the nuts off. So we might have to cut them off or grind them off. And so literally they're like, hey, nobody can take showers. We're on rationing water. And so they're like, we need you to fix this. So I'm down there, and I've got my leading petty officers behind me, so the guy right above me, then the chief's above him, and then the engineering officers behind him, and then literally the captain was back there too, like looking down and watching me in this tight little spot trying to do this maintenance on this valve. And I look up and I'm like, hey, chief, I go, if I could use my feet or a cheater bar, I might be able to get this off. And he goes, he looks, and I think somebody heard it, and they hear the captain go, do it. So I got up, put this cheater bar on there, and I got up with my back against some piping, and I put my feet out at the end, and I just pushed with all my might. Yeah. And it just, you heard this like a gunshot, and it broke the socket. Like it was that rusted on. Finally, they're like, okay, grind it off. So we had to grind it off, and it was kind of a pain in the rear because it was a lot more work, but it was pretty funny. When you got to survive, sometimes some of the rules go out the window.
That's
they do.
I love that though. The captain,
do it,
get it done. At the end of the day, that's what you got to do.
That was pretty funny.
What does a captain of a submarine do? I mean, he's just kind of overseeing just putting out every little fire and every little.
Yeah, he's responsible.
He's like the center of the nervous system almost.
Yeah.
As long as everything goes well, he's doing his job. Anything that goes wrong, he's fired. I mean, anytime you hear a sub that runs aground, or there's a couple boats that have run aground, or you've had some kind of issues or problems, the first thing they do is just fire the captain. I'm like, that's kind of cheap, but you've got a lot. You get a lot of responsibility on your back, man. Those guys.
That's what I mean. It's like, how can you really oversee everything, or you're just depending on the people to be in charge of those departments to be efficient and reporting honestly and good communication back to you.
Well, and something too is the morale of the people. Like, if you've got a good leader, and I think this is a good lesson in life in general, right? If you've got a good leader and the people feels like I just had a podcast recently on my podcast, talk about inspire, motivate, and support. When you have people that are underneath you, if you're in a supervisory position, you want to inspire them, you want to motivate them to do good things. You want to support them in what they're doing. And so if you're getting that IMS, right, that good inspiration, motivation, then you're going to work hard for people. You're going to want to do a good job. You're not going to want to let them down.
Yeah.
But when you got crappy leadership, then that just goes downhill. It's like, oh, hey, we're not going to get that Liberty port that we promised you now. We have to work harder. And, they treat people poorly. They don't work as hard or work as well. Things don't work quite as smooth over time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it is being a good leader, is supporting the people, making sure, and overseeing, making sure that each division officer, it's like span of control, right? We have that in the fire service. You can only oversee so many people, right?
3 to 5.
3 to 7 is the range. 5 is about ideal. If you start getting more than that, then you start forming sectors, divisions, groups, so that you can spread that chain of command out. It's like the military, anything else. Yeah. And so they've got, the weapons officer. He's in charge of all the torpedoes, all the countermeasures, all the small arms for the watchstanders. There's the the engineering officer. He's in charge of all the engineering spaces. There's what are some of the other ones? Jeez. But you got the sonar guys, the radio guys. I mean, there's all these different divisions of the boat, and they've all got officers overseeing chiefs that are overseeing leading petty officers. So does that make sense? Yeah. So that's a big part of it, I think, is that he inspires, motivates, supports his men. They're making sure that their groups are doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing, and less likely to make a mistake or things going bad. So but stuff happens.
In fact, I think I saw in the Guardfish's history that it was run aground in 1968 or something like that. And I remember thinking, like, ooh, I bet the captain was fired the moment they got that thing unstuck.
Run aground, meaning just hit the bottom?
Well, yeah, it hits the bottom. It can be anything from running into an underground mountain, which a boat recently did. I forget which one it was, not the Louisville, but there was one that like the whole sonar dome. There's pictures of it online of the sonar dome being smashed in, and but yeah, that hit an uncharted undersea mountain. Anything from that to pulling in, we were pulling into Okinawa, and the boat they rubbed the bottom along this big giant pier. They rubbed the bottom. Well, that's technically running aground. So yeah, it could be serious or not so serious. So.
Did you spend a lot of time in Japan?
Yeah, actually we did. Yeah, we went to Yokosuka there and pulled in there.
Did you get leave?
You pull in there and you fix everything that's broken on the. Oh yeah, you get time off when you're there.
It's Japan. I've always that's my bucket list place for me is Japan.
as well.
It's interesting.
In the islands of like Okinawa and stuff.
Yeah, we went to Okinawa, went to Yokosuka in Japan, and then from there we went visited Tokyo and stuff. But it's really weird. Like people talk about racism in the U.S. When you go overseas there, there was places you'd go and Japanese only. Like they just wouldn't even let you in.
I have a friend who was married to a Japanese immigrant woman, and he had to sell his car because it was Korean made. It was like a Kia or something like that. And she's like, we're not having that piece of trash in our driveway.
Well, I mean, I say the same thing around my house. But
Yeah, Kia, that's a Kia. Come on.
People love to talk about racism in the U.S. Asians are freaking racist, dude.
Yeah, no. But it was interesting, and then it was really expensive back then. So, like to buy a pitcher of beer, was like $20, which was outrageous back then, right?
Yeah.
And so it was really expensive, but it was interesting. We toured and went to the big Buddha statues and stuff.
Yeah.
Thailand was cool. We went to Thailand and got Liberty there, and got to go to Bangkok and stuff. And that was really fun. I was a diver on the boat too. So on the sub, they have a dive locker where they have guys that can go get auxiliary training and scuba. So we went to Navy scuba school, and you're there with 27 recon Marines and me and 2 other sailors, and we're like, holy crap, these are like the Force Recon guys going through their dive school. So that was really fun. But Thailand, we had to dive the anchor, and it was a 7-knot current.
Oh,
and so we're like literally holding on to a rope.
Holy shit.
Because you have to dive the anchor to make sure that it's not fouled before they pull it back up.
So the anchor's already down, and
anchor's down. Anchor's down. We're getting ready to leave, so they want to pull that back up. And so before they do, they want to make sure that there's.
How deep was it?
I think it's like 70 feet.
Holy shit!
I mean, something like that.
Are you on nitrous at that point, or?
No. 130. We can go to 130 feet on just regular.
And you're on a scuba tank for this.
Yeah, just scuba diving.
Tied off to something, or
we had a rope. We just held onto this rope. We were like kicking as hard as we could, and you couldn't fight the current, and so we were just like, hey, hold on to this rope. We just, the
like
anchor,
you're blowing in the wind down
the
there.
anchor chain. The anchor chain's there, and so you're kind of right there by the anchor chain. And if you came up the surface, they would. A guy with a small boat, they could have grabbed you. But
do you still dive?
I haven't done much lately. I was with the fire department. I was got a rescue swimmer program going for the fire department.
Have you dove in the Puget Sound?
Not for a long time. I haven't done much lately. I got so spoiled diving in the hot, beautiful 89-degree water in Guam and
Southeast Asia,
Philippines, and so nice.
But
now when you got
a couple times, it's pretty cold.
You got to put on so much wets. Well, and now the wetsuits have gotten better, but you're like Ralphie's brother on the Christmas Story. Help me! You can't move. So,
what was the visibility down there? In the Guam and stuff, was it just
Guam? You can see forever. Yeah, 150. Long ways. But we did dive a couple places where it was you couldn't see anything in front of you.
I took my dive in what was it?
Probably Edmonds.
No, I've been in Edmonds, but down a little bit further south.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
nice.
And it is not.
You can't see
murky.
Yeah, it just depends.
So like it's a good day.
Stuff.
It's 10 foot.
It depends where you're at too. Yeah, but no, we had a rescue we were trying to do for the fire department off of Mukilteo there, and I was out there just breath hold snorkeling, and this guy was on a little. Him and his girlfriend went out. He's on first date, right? They meet on what are the online dating things?
Grindr
or whatever. Yeah, whatever they are.
Oh, sorry, that's Jordan. Hang on.
No.
That's one of the things about being married 30 years, right? You have no idea what online dating is like. But
it's hard.
This guy met somebody, and they go, let's meet down there, and he goes, I'll put up some crab pots and make us some food, So he goes out on the little Sevi lure raft, and she's watching him, and the boat starts, and he falls overboard and disappears. No. And so she's calling 911. Oh my God. So I get there and they're literally like, well, we think he's gone, but why don't we put you in the water? And I'm like, okay. And so I go out there and can't even see a foot in front of your face.
That's not how I want to find a dead body, by the way, is just to go into dark water. And that to me has always seemed like one of the most awful jobs.
Oh yeah. No, it's a little spooky.
Yeah.
But here inside, I'm like literally like praying, like, God, help me find this guy. Let me see something. Yeah. But so I go to where he went down, and I dove down, because we just breath hold dive, and it was about 12, 15 feet.
Yep.
I go down and I see nothing, and then there's about a foot of kelp on the ground on the bottom. So even when I do get to the bottom, I'm like reaching around in there. So I do as many dives as I can. I'm like, I can't do this by myself. So then I just start doing a grid pattern back and forth. And people are saying, oh, he must be down there because the current's going this way. They'd throw a life vest in the water and it would go down by the ferry docks.
Yeah.
So they go, oh, the current's going that way. So I'd kind of search that way, but I'm like, I don't know. Well, that was the wind.
Yeah.
And so I was out there for an hour. Well, the funny thing was my booties, we'd been training and for some reason my booties weren't in my gear. So I'm not wearing booties, and I got the fins that need booties, so my feet are rubbed bloody raw. But yeah, I looked as long as I could, and after around an hour, they just pulled me out. And but then when the tide went out, they found him close to where he
went down.
So
yeah, dang.
But yeah. So anyways, yeah, the murky waters and.
Yeah, shitty date.
Murky waters in strong.
I know. Can you imagine being that gal? I'm never dating again.
Yeah. Deleting this app.
What happened on your last date? Oh, well.
Let me tell you.
You don't want to know.
Yeah.
It's fresh.
Yeah. That took the wind out of my sails for a second.
Yeah, but that water is scary. I mean, that's why being in a submarine is so scary. It's like we're talking about this stuff, and I've done a lot of boating and fishing in the San Juans, and like go diving there. When that current gets ripping in those islands, it's like even if you're in a boat, it can get dangerous. Being in the water can get dangerous. Being confined and like on the ships and being in all these open waters. I mean, it is as beautiful as it is being in the water like that. There is an element that that's why going to the ocean and standing in front of waves is humbling, or being there at night. It's just, you hear that ripping and roaring. And it's kind of crazy that man has traversed seas from the Pacific to the Atlantic to all these areas.
If you go to the water survival school, did you go through water survival at Fairchild?
No.
You go through the water survival training. Me and a buddy that was kind of a cool story too. But they have a big logo there. It says the ocean makes cowards of us all.
Oh yeah,
this giant octopus. But yeah, me and a buddy at the fire department got to go through we're the only civilians who've been able to go through the dunker training.
Oh, is that
Healer dunker training at Fairchild. That was kind of cool.
Is that where the helicopter?
Yeah, it hits the water, rolls over, and you got to wait, and escape out. But
that's cool.
There's an infamous video of a Marine Corps CH-46 attempting a landing on an aircraft carrier, and it hooks a wheel on the netting around the edge and flips over upside down. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah.
So when I contracted for the agency, one of the guys on my team was the sole survivor of that crash.
Whoa.
Yeah, talk about wild shit.
Well,
and that thing hits the ocean and it just disappears.
Yeah.
Not like it floated for a second, then turned on its side and went under. It just goes immediately gone.
Yeah.
There's a guy that I work with at the fire department. His name was Kurt Lowe. Amazing guy. He's another one. Me and him and two other guys got fired for not taking the vaccine. The guy's awesome. He was a captain for a lot of years and mentor of mine. And he was a Navy rescue swimmer, and he was on a chopper that went in the water, and he made it out with a couple other people, and a bunch of people didn't make it out.
Dang.
And he's got that story. But it's well, and it's funny you're talking about being scared. People ask that, were you scared going underwater? It's funny because when I first showed up down there, like, I get out of all my training schools. I'm going to my first boat. I show up in San Diego, and I'm in flip-flops and a fluorescent yellow. This is 87 or 89. Fluorescent Nike, with a fluorescent thing on there.
You have
and I got
zinc oxide on your nose.
And I go down there, and I'm like, where's the, I'm supposed to be on the guardfish and blah, blah. And the guy goes, oh, I'm on the guardfish. Come on down. And he's dressed in his dungarees. And I'm like, are you sure? And he goes, oh, yeah, come on. It's like a Saturday. I go down there, and he takes me onto the boat, and the officer that's on duty that day is there, and I'm like standing there all freaked out, and he's like, don't worry about it, dude. But when you first get to the boat, okay, we'll show up on Monday morning, and you show up and you crawl down inside, and it really stinks, and it's tight quarters, but then you go to lunch, and then you come back, and then you're working on stuff, and then maybe in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you go out to sea for a couple of days. But when you go out to sea, the tugboat pulls up next to you, ties onto you, pulls you away from the dock. They take you out a little ways, push you out towards the ocean, and you cruise along for a little bit. And the boat's rocking and rolling because they're not designed for the surface, right? And so we had this one senior chief that nobody really liked him, and when he was the officer or the engineering watch supervisor. So that's the chief that would watch all the engine space. But he would come down and he'd always get seasick. And so he'd be down there, I'd be in engine room lower level taking my logs, and he's over there puking in the bilge, and I'm like, asshole, nobody likes you. But you'd go out a ways, and then you'd get to the point where you dive, the boat angles down, then it goes flat, and then it's all quiet. It's just smooth. Like, it could be the roughest seas, but when you're down, it's kind of like diving, right?
Yeah.
When you're down underwater, you just cruising, and once in a while the boat will go like this and like this.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll lean a little bit if they take a sharp corner, but not much.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't really think about the fact that you just, because this is just where you work every day.
Your relativity is like nothing changes.
Yeah.
But I did have one time when I was a little freaked out. I actually got scared, and we were doing some drills, and so a lot of times during the drills they would scram the reactor, which basically means it's like if you trip a breaker at home, oh shoot, we had the microwave and the toaster oven run at the same time and the breaker tripped. Yeah. Okay, now you got to restart everything that was running. Okay, so the reactor scram, and so then you got to restart that. Well, there's ways, the way they get to the surface is usually they drive to the surface, so the propeller's turning, and they have the dive planes, right, and they just angle those, and they just aim for the surface and propel themselves up, and then they get close, and then they put air into the tanks and it bobs up. But they have what they call the chicken switches are in the control room. And so, there's these switches there. And if the shit's hitting the fan, they reach up, emergency blow, and they pull those handles, and 4,500 PSI air blows into all the tanks. And that thing just comes to the surface like a cork, right?
Buoyant as hell.
So that's like your last resort, right? So normally, you've got this margin of error, but we were drilling and we were pretty deep, and we're down and we lose, reactor scram, we lose propulsion and all that. So we're like, okay, so we're pretty deep. And then all of a sudden we're kind of we have an up angle, but we're going backwards. So we're sinking down, and they're like, hey, get propulsion up, and you can, and somebody wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing.
What kind of speeds are you sinking at?
I don't know what it was. All I knew was we didn't have propulsion.
That string's starting to shrink.
And we were our depth was increasing, right? And so, and I'm like, and you could hear people's voice. Like, everybody's normally just super cool. Yeah. But then you start hearing the voices.
Start getting tight, a little cracking.
This isn't good. And so then finally it's like emergency blow. And it's like, I'm like, holy crap, to actually do an emergency
like
blow. Because that's what they think ended up sinking the Thresher, was they lost propulsion, and when they went to do the emergency blow, the valves froze up because they didn't have the dryers that dried the air. And so the strainers and the valves actually froze, and so the air couldn't get to the tanks, and then it just went down. And
so when you guys dive, so you fill the ballast tanks with water, correct, to dive?
Well, technically, you let the air out, and the water so there's vents on the bottom, there's open grates, and there's valves on the top, and it's split in the middle, so there's right and left side, port and starboard. And then the valve opens, and then the water just, you see this air blasting out the top and goes up, fills with water, and so then now it's negatively buoyant, the sub is.
So are there massive compressors that just sit there full?
Oh, yeah. We got these high-pressure air compressors. Yeah, they're high packs. Yeah.
But they must have to be pressurized before you dive. Yeah?
Well, you have air tanks. You get giant, huge air banks, huge cylinders. They're actually inside they were inside the ballast tanks. But, giant tanks, air compressor tanks. Like, on your air compressor, you got the big tank. Yep. Huge tanks of those. Yeah.
What do they pressurize those to?
4,500 PSI.
Shit.
Yeah. But then at some point those won't work at a certain depth.
No. Those weren't.
right?
No. Those
Because
were-
the cabin's
No.
pressurized.
Yeah, that's plenty of air. Yeah, that's plenty of
To
air.
push the
Just pushes the water out. Oh yeah,
right out.
just,
Okay.
Yeah, plenty of air. Yeah.
I wasn't sure at like a certain depth if the pressure.
We did
so
the calculations.
low.
It's 13.
It's
Remember? 13, 14.
14.
Yeah, divided.
What's the deepest a sub has ever gone? Do you know?
You know, I don't, but it's kind of funny not funny. It's sad, but you guys.
Well,
I was just going to say,
You guys have heard of that.
Everett just went straight to the
Current
bottom.
events.
The Titan. Yeah, the Titan. Well, and you want to hear something interesting is that so at the fire, when the fire department canned me, I was like, okay, shoot, what am I going to do? Make money. And, I was a contractor between after getting out of the Navy, and I did a couple other jobs. I was a general contractor for a while. I was like, well, I can go swing a hammer, but I'm like, what would I really want to do? Well, I knew that they had that sub company down in Everett, Ocean Gate, because we had actually been on calls down there. They had a little fire where some batteries burned in a container behind their building.
So you're saying they don't have a great safety record?
I have no judgment whatsoever on them, and my heart, obviously my heart goes out for the owner and the families of the people, but yeah, so I was like, that would be flipping rad to go do that, right? And so I knew the way their business works. So the way their subs work is they have their own little mini floating dock, and it had ballast tanks on it, and their little sub, they'd put it on there, and they could tow it with a smaller, not a huge boat, and they could just tow it out into the sound, and then they'd fill the ballast tanks, and the little dock would go down, and then the sub would just cruise off and cruise around and do its thing and come back, and they raise it back up and they'd tow it back in. So they didn't have all the expensive costs of the big. Yeah. Like when the Titanic expedition they did, yes, they did, because they had to have all that support out there. But so I was like, I went down there. I'm like, oh, cool. I want to go down there and check it out. And I found out online they were hiring. So I went down there, and two guys were coming out in a truck, and I said, hey, yeah. I go, my name's Brent. Blah blah blah. I was like, I was thinking about applying for a job. I saw you guys in an opening. They're like, okay, cool. Yeah, I would just turn in online. And I'm like, yeah, I worked on subs in the Navy. And all of a sudden they kind of look at me like, oh, cool, And then I go, yeah. And I go, I was a Navy diver too, because I knew they used divers. Oh, interesting. I say, I've been in fire department for the last 20 years and, I'm a rescue swimmer and stuff, EMT. They're like, dude, you're overqualified. And I'm like, oh, that's, hey. And so they go, come back in an hour. So I came back, and the guy started giving me a tour of the whole place down there. So he walked me through, showed me all the different submersibles they had. And it's a cool operation. And the one that went down, I was able to sit inside of it and look inside of it.
Whoa.
Yeah, no, I saw it all open. And
from just glancing at, eyes on, being there, did it look like a piece of equipment that, could withstand, or that's just unrealistic?
It's so hard to make those kind of judgments. There's so many, when your margin of error goes down, that's where things become really important, right? Yeah. Like whether you're in space or whether you're 13,000 feet underwater, right? That's where you don't have a margin of error. And that's like what happened with the Thresher. Here's a submarine doing its trials, and one little thing that can go wrong. It's not like you're on a boat, out on the sound, and hey, my propulsion's out, and I can just float and call the Coast Guard, or even just jump in the water.
Hit a bank.
There's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And so that's why they have so many, regulations and rules and standards and all that. And after that, they implemented the thing called SubSafe, which is like every part that we would, like if we needed to do maintenance and I needed an O-ring, it was in a labeled package, and they could control, they knew where that rubber was taken out of the ground, like that made that O-ring, like every part of
which tree in Brazil.
Yeah, every part of the process that made these different parts, they could control and knew what was going on. And so, like when we did maintenance we had these giant R114 air conditioning units that cooled the sub down in the hot weather. Well, the end of this thing, this bell is like, 6 feet in diameter, huge. You need rigging chains to pull it off. And there was like 30 or 40 bolts all the way around the outside. Well, you had to torque those to a certain spec. And there was a guy whose job was just to watch you torquing those. And he had a piece of paper, and it said number 1, number 2, number 3. And you had to do your star pattern on all these 40 bolts and take this down to 30 inch pounds, take that one down. Now do them all. then go to 40, then go to 50. I mean, it was super, super. So when you've got a company like that that's, trying to do
Hit
something
it with the impact driver.
Trying to do something on the
joystick
cheap,
from Camping World. I heard
it's just tough because what's the margin of error that's there, and they
apparently too much.
But you know what though? That's to me that's the spirit of adventure, man.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
something happened. They knew the risk there.
Look at the people who crossed the country in wagon trains
Flippin' A,
to
I
get
love
to the
it.
West Coast.
I love people like that.
If it was
Step
safe,
out
it
and-
wouldn't be cool.
Exactly. Step out and do something, exciting and and innovate. And
to talk about that margin of error thing, like the military and like the fire department and all these units are so great. And you said this earlier. You said whenever something bad happens, it seems like a new rule's written. And that is the history of the fire department, of the military. When a major catastrophe happens, well, now we change our doctrine and what our training protocol is. We didn't know about this thing until it happened, and now we're going to create a new rule. And when you have a company, or not a company, when you have like the Navy that's had a history of doing this for so long, well, we've gone through the ups, we've gone through the downs. We've seen what can happen when you don't do this, when you don't do that. That's why we have this new rule. And even though there is that sense of adventure, which I think we should all have, it's like, yeah, man, you don't have the experience, though. You have hundreds of years of maritime experience when it comes to the Navy and stuff like that.
But here's my thing. Are you gonna tell a guy, hey, you can't go out there and do that?
No, go nuts.
Like
but I'm not
you
going
can't
on
get in
it.
a sailboat and head off towards Hawaii. Why not? Because you need to fill out these forms and do this stuff. It's
I love that there's
screw
people
that.
out doing that kind of shit.
It's like, hey, you can't take those people down there. Now I can understand if they're paying money and
they paid money and signed the waiver.
But that's the thing, right? Yeah, where does personal liberty come in, and where does government overreach and people? And so I'm all about personal liberty and being able to do, because
100%.
people get hurt. People die in life. That's just the way life is sometimes, and you can't.
That's the way life is every time.
But if
exactly right,
if I'm
Exactly.
a consumer,
So-
I rather go see the Titanic with the Navy than I do with a company out of Everett.
But you got to think, right? It's like, do those people not know that, hey, there's a bunch of risk here? I mean, I'm betting they signed a waiver.
Yeah. Those are the
they
same
signed
people that
multiple waivers, and it's not like these were poor people.
No,
They paid
exactly.
$250,000 each, so they're
They-
people of means and probably education, so they know what they're getting themselves into.
They had a ticket for that, and then they had a ticket for SpaceX. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Or climbing Everest, right?
And
they're the guy that's going to have somebody hold their hand while they're up on the Hillary step, lined up with 50 other people waiting to,
It's
That
one
guy
of the
we
last,
talked about
like,
in earlier
frontiers,
episodes,
you know?
they're dressed in an Elvis costume, and they're going to go jump 16 school buses and get fired out of a cannon on Sunday afternoon.
Dude, that sounds safer than going and seeing the Titanic, to be completely honest.
I don't know, man. I might get in that submersible before I get in the cannon.
Dude, put that Elvis suit on me.
No, that was that's pretty ballsy. I remember when I was talking to them, they were like, yeah, we doing another Titanic, expedition, and they were telling me about it. I was like, oh, that'd be cool. I went home to my wife, but it was funny because I was sitting there with the guy, and he's like, yeah, well, this is great. He goes, this lady came out, and that was like their HR lady or whatever, and he goes, yeah, this is so and so. This is Brent. He goes, yeah, talk to her. He goes, I'll have you give her your information and stuff, and she'll have some stuff for you to fill out and everything. And she goes, and he looked at me and he goes, of course, you got to be vaccinated, right? And I kind of just go, I kind of look at him, shake my head, and inside I'm thinking, oh, bummer. And he goes, yeah, we do. And granted, they go overseas and stuff, and they travel, which at that point in time, it was like, oh, you can't go anywhere, right? And I was just too
tired of
dejected.
the fight. Yeah.
I was just like, okay, I didn't say anything. And I went home and I shot him an email and said, sorry to say that. And I found out later that that's the reason why they were hiring people, is because they had to let 3 or 4 people go.
Yeah.
Maybe the vaccine has saved your life.
Or at least, no.
Don't last a lot.
Who knows?
Ridiculous.
But,
Well, that's something I also want to talk about is your time in the fire department.
Well, hang on. Let's take a pee break, and then let's wrap up Navy right there and take a pee break and come back and talk fire service.
Okay.
All right, pee break. We're back.
We're back.
Oh, we're back.
Oh, shoot.
Hello.
So we're done with Navy service. Let's talk. Or did you have more Navy questions?
No, I don't have any more Navy questions. I'm curious about the fire.
Yeah.
When
Okay.
did you start in fire, and what was your?
Yeah, no. So yeah, after the Navy got out, came up here, worked for a company selling equipment to the Russian Far East for a while, and then selling bearings and power transmission equipment stuff, electrical parts, and then started. The guy said, "Hey, I want to partner work in construction." But he just wanted a laborer that had their own contractor's license. So I got my license, and then he had me doing the crap jobs. And so finally, I'm like, there was enough work out there, so I just started doing construction. So I did construction for 4 or 5 years and had a framing company. And but it was like that place where you need to either get big or stay really small. And I was just working my butt off. And my wife's like, he's not happy. And she actually started praying for me. And she was like, God, what did you create this man to do? You know? And I was like, and at the same time, I was like, oh man, God, what should I do with my life? And besides this, right? Because it's beating you up. And it's similar. You shared a story earlier about seeing a building that was on fire, right? I had seen multiple within a short period of time, like car wrecks and different accidents where I was the first person there. And I remember seeing this out on 180th, this car wreck. I come driving up to the intersection. I'm kind of like, something doesn't seem right. And I see plastic in the road. I see a car over here up against a tree steaming. I see another car. I'm like, what's going on? And I get out, and these two people are hunched over, bleeding over the steering wheel, and another guy's over there going, oh, and I'm like, holy crap, I think I'm the first one here. And so I call 911, and these guys, firefighters, show up, and they just are like, I'm like, what do I do? You know, and they're just like, click, 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 you know, they got the immediate actions down. And I'm like, man, that looks cool. But I never thought my wife would let me do it. But at the same time, I was coaching my daughter's basketball team, and one of the dads was a medic for Shoreline Fire Department. And I said, hey, Lee, I go, what's it take to become a firefighter these days? And he's like, oh yeah, you got to test and stuff. And I thought there was affirmative action, you know, it's like, you got to, you know, do you have to be a minority or, you know, and he's like, no, he goes, they kind of got rid of that.
We always, so what year was this?
This was in 2002.
Okay. So shortly after that, about 2007, 8, when I was first Jen and I got married in 2008, and I promised I would stay home. And I ended up contracting overseas with the agency for another 2 years. But during that time, I was looking for work at home. And we'd always heard that for a fire department opening, there's going to be 2,000 applicants per opening. And if you're not female or minority, don't even bother.
That's what I was told as well.
That it had been that way. Excuse me. It had been that way, but they had changed it. There was the laws that actually changed. So they have civil service rules that are in place. So it's very, very rigid as far as, but now the interesting thing is it's changing now. It's coming back now, which they very much are discriminating based on your, you know, if you're
skin color,
look like us, right? Straight white male, you're less likely to get hired.
Interesting.
Than somebody that's not.
When you need help in an emergency, what you care about is equity.
Well, one thing I'll say about
meritocracy.
that time period when you got on was, because I was shortly after that when I was dabbling with firefighting, is 9/11 happened, and everyone, in my opinion, because I did those firefighting schools, everyone wanted to become a firefighter.
Wow. Yeah,
and here I am at like 20 years old, and I've got 30-year-olds with MBAs going to school for firefighting because they wanted to have a calling and maybe more of a purpose.
We got lawyers. We got engineers. Like one guy was a chemical engineer. One guy actually is still a practicing lawyer. We've got geological engineers. We got a lot of interesting careers and stuff.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I don't care what color or gender you are. If you can come in and do the job, then that's great. And we have some wonderful people of every color and gender at the department that I work with, and wonderful people. So
a meritocracy
don't get me wrong.
A meritocracy, regardless of where you come from.
But that's the thing, right? Like we used to have this butt-kicking test. So when I got hired, 2,000 people applied, right?
Yeah.
I think they said like 1,200 people took the written test. Of that test, they took the top, I think it was like 0.5 of 1%. It was like 56 people. Then they took us to the physical. We had the hardest physical that I've ever heard of, that anybody had ever heard of. And so 56 people taken, and they weren't wimpy people. It's kind of like you were saying, that guy was, you know, that was taking that electrician's test, he's a strong guy. But only 13 people passed it out of 56. And so then of that 13, they took the top 6 of us. They gave us a physical exam, full body physical exam, x-ray, back x-rays, all that. And then a full day of psychological testing. And then they made a list, and then I was number 1, and another guy was number 2, and we got hired. It was just the 2 of us. And so that we used to have a really hard test. Now they changed it to where they said, well, that's too hard. We're not getting the diverse candidates that we want, right? Wow. So they said, okay, well, let's make this easier. So they went to the CPAT, which my 12-year-old, when my daughter was 12 years old, she could have passed it, right?
Yeah. Very,
very easy. Like I went and took that one while I was testing for the other one, and I was like, this is not even close to being as hard as that other test. And so, so now we've got all these people getting injured in training, because I do a lot of training. I worked at the fire academy. I teach classes, teaching new recruits. And we had the HR lady brought a guy in, and I was actually in with him. And they were asking him, like, were you being pushed too hard? And were they this and were they that? And finally I said, hey, I go, here's the thing. I go, we used to have this really hard test, right? And she said, yeah, well, I think they quit doing that test because they were afraid of a lawsuit. I go, yeah, did we ever have a lawsuit? No. Okay, now we've lowered the standards, and you get all these recruits that come in and they get injured. I go, do we have any lawsuits now? And she's like, oh yeah, we've got lots of, because they get recruits that come in that aren't fit enough. Oh, nice. They get injured 3 days into training, and 2 years later they're still on the city dole for L&I injuries.
Yeah, incapable.
And it's like so it's a bummer. I'm like, hey, she's like, oh, you got a good point there.
Have these standard changes been going on for a while, or they were exacerbated after COVID, or a little bit?
No, this is long ago. This is 10 years ago, maybe, 7-8 years ago that they got rid of that really hard physical test.
Has it changed standards post COVID though? Every civil service, like for police, firefighters, paramedics.
The police, because nobody wants to be a police officer anymore. They're allowing like convicted felons and people with past
they're allowing
histories of mental illness.
Aren't American citizens to become.
They're literally taking anybody.
A lot of services have suffered. I know buddies that are firefighters that are like, my department's looking for people as well.
Well, when you're the government of your city is bad-mouthing you as a police officer, would you want to go work for somebody like that?
No. Who would?
Does that inspire? Does that inspire, motivate, and support? Right? You're not getting supported. No, and if you're out there and they're like, you do anything wrong, and we're just going to string you out to dry, I'd be like, and see, it's funny too, because we get the fire department, like, we get a lot of calls, right? And you hear them talk about, the hospitals are overrun. Right, we get a lot of people that have just decided that 911 is their primary care physician. They don't go to a clinic. They don't take care of their own. Oh, I got a cut. Should I clean it out, put a steri strip on it, maybe a little super glue? No, I'm going to go to call 911. I want to ride to the hospital in an ambulance. And I'll literally get people that will tell me, I want to go in an ambulance because I'll get in the back door and I don't have to wait out in the lobby. With the responsible people that come in and get triaged. Yeah. So now what the hospitals do is they just triage them coming in off an ambulance. Yeah. So check this out. So now here you guys, citizens, right? You've got your local fire department that you paid tax dollars for. And because other irresponsible people say, I want to ride in an ambulance. Well, that ambulance gets to the hospital, and the hospital says, well, just because you came in an ambulance doesn't mean we're going to put you at the front of the line. So ambulance crew, you and the patient sit over there.
Oh, the crew's stuck with them.
And they make the patient, the crew sit with a patient for 2-3 hours. Oh, boy. So now your aid car from your local fire station is not in service to help you or your mom or your grandma or your neighbor that's having a heart attack because they're down sitting there. We literally had a lady that said, they said, hey, we brought a chair over for her. I said, man, we got this chair for you. Could you, we're going to put you off the gurney and get on the chair. No. I'm not getting off this gurney. Like, ma'am, I refuse to get off this gurney until I get in a hospital bed.
Good Lord.
And I was like, what do? You knock it over and dump her on the ground?
Yes,
like she physically 100%. Refused.
Yeah.
And so at one point we had like 3 medic rig and 2 aid cars at the hospital. They'd been there for 3 hours. We had an engine company that went down, and took our crew and relieved them so they could come get their dinner and get a break and go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
But we took our 3 guys off an engine out of service and sat with these 3 patients until they could get a room.
Unbelievable.
But that's people are becoming less resilient.
Yep.
They're becoming less able to take care of themselves.
It's just a high level of dependence. It's an overall high level of dependence that society is devolving into.
Yeah.
And
How old was this gal?
Oh, she 30s, 40s, maybe 30s, 40s, probably 40s. But it's funny. You got the "No one is coming to save you" shirt on, right? And my podcast, I talk about be your own first responder, right?
Yep.
It's like, because literally, if anything goes wrong, but even now, like, see, that's just regular good times. That's not a disaster or an emergency.
Yeah.
You think that 911 is going to be there for you when the shit hits the fan?
Yeah. When
If there's
the big earthquake hits.
If there's a big earthquake, right, which is, an EMP, even just a windstorm or a snowstorm
Somebody
that puts out knocks out the power, right?
Yeah.
Like they literally, they activate the CERT team because they're like, hey, we got an engine company sitting on a down power line that's got cones on it. Hey, CERT people, can you come and help and babysit this power line until the PUD can get there?
What's CERT?
So CERT is a Community Emergency Response Team. So that's a federal, FEMA actually runs that.
Is it like a volunteer deal?
It's training. Yeah, it's training for citizens, and it's a pretty good program actually. It's one thing that the federal government does pretty good, but they give
free labor,
training and information to citizens so that they can take care of their own community.
Okay.
Like, so they say, hey, and I'm one of the instructors for it. Hey, there's a major earthquake, and we don't have enough first responders to search all the buildings. Here's some lightly damaged buildings. We're over here doing, there's a school that's collapsed, and we've got heavy equipment going over here, but we've got nobody to search these lightly damaged buildings. And so we train citizens to go in groups and pairs and to safely search other buildings and do some of that light work. So
How do you get involved with that?
that's pretty cool. So you can just call like your local fire. You can call a local fire department, and they'd be able to point you the right direction. We used to train it through this fire department in Everett. The city of Everett could tell you, or you could go online too. And if you go on to like FEMA and just type in CERT, that information's there. And you can, but there's all the materials free. And I actually have a group of guys that we train with, and that we get a CERT team, then we do some stuff. So it's kind of cool.
It'd be interesting.
Yeah. Shout out to TKC CERT. So.
All right. Going back to 2002, from the time you applied, how long did it take until you were actually receiving a paycheck on the fire department?
You get a paycheck right away as soon as you. Well, so
from submitting your application.
So I don't know. I don't want to piss anybody off, but
Pretty quick, huh?
yeah,
this guy went quick.
So I had
to apply.
So it was a Wednesday, and my wife had said, I think you should apply to be a firefighter. I'm like, oh, okay. So I saw my buddy Lee, and I go, hey. He goes, yeah, you just got to start testing. It might take you a year or two. And I said, okay. So I called my dad. I said, hey, I'm thinking about, testing for the fire department. Well, he called a friend of his that he knew from banking that was an Everett firefighter. And that guy said, oh, yeah, have him turn in his application because they're accepting applications now and it's cut off as Friday. So I got my application in, and then the written test was a month later, and then the physical a month later, and then the other stuff a month later. So about 4 months later, it was as fast as you could possibly get hired. And I was like, I call it a miracle. I thank God for that, because it just rarely happens that fast. Okay. But anyways, at the same time during that, I was testing for other departments. And then after I got hired, I had people calling me saying, hey, you want to come work for Bellevue? You want to come work for Arlington?
Yeah. Interesting.
But it worked out. So I think Everett's the best. So.
Okay. So in the early 2000s, what were what was the majority of your calls? Were we starting to see opiates back? I can't remember.
No, not really. Not back then so much. But anybody that's for the fire service, 85% of its aid calls. And it's funny because I had no EMS in emergency medical services, for people that don't know. I had no medical training at all or knowledge of that. I mean, I could put a Band-Aid on, but and so I'm like, all right, we're gonna fight fires and car wrecks, and they're like, this old lady fell down and she's stuck between her bathtub and her toilet and she's covered in poo, and you're like, what? So it's like, hey, get in there.
This is not glamour.
Get in there and take a blood pressure. I'm like, how do you do that? Have you been to EMT school yet? No.
Oh, God.
It literally,
I was just here to take my shirt off and wash the truck.
No, I was gonna. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when do we do the calendar shoot?
I know. They kept put your shirt back on. Weir, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You're embarrassing us. Your belly's hanging out.
Oh man.
But yeah. So it was a lot of emergency medical, and I grew to enjoy that. Quite a bit. It's fun. And that part of the cool things about the fire service for me, it's physical. You're using your body, your hands, your muscles. You got to train. You got to be strong. Using your brains because you got to learn. You got to learn how to be an EMT. You got to learn medical issues, fire science, all kinds of technical rescue stuff. But then there's the personal aspect where you're holding some old lady's hand that's dying. Or I've had to tell people that, yeah, your mom just passed away. A little kid.
Yeah.
I still think of one just right now when I came back, this little kid, and he's like, "Is my mommy okay?" I tell him, no, she's dead. It's like, but I enjoy that, not that part of it, but if somebody has to tell them, I'd like to be the one that can bring some compassion to that and try to, and try to help people. And, you're always on parade. You're driving on the street in the fire engine, and the car pulls up, and the dad gives you the thumbs up, the mom's waving, and the kids in the back are, you hand them stickers out the window or something. I mean, it's just the coolest thing,
Yeah.
There's a trust there, and there's a, and so I love that. And so it's an honor and a privilege to be able to, do that job.
It's cool.
Yeah, I went through, the EMT school.
Oh, nice.
I
Where
did
at?
that in North Seattle.
Okay.
So I did that, and that was what I was going to do, and then I ended up turning the corner and hitting the electrical.
Did you do anything with it? Did you work for an ambulance company or anything? Or?
No, but that's how I met my girlfriend. She was working for an
nice.
ambulance company. So now she's a ER tech. But
Oh, cool.
yeah, she worked for Falk for a couple of years there while we were together. But watching, kind of being close to that, group of people, because again, I was told you're the wrong color. Sorry, bud. You don't even apply, and I allowed that to get enough, because part of me thinks that was being said by a lot of people just because it was like, well, I haven't done it, like, and
Or they don't want the competition. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Hey,
and
go ahead and don't
I
apply,
didn't
Jordan.
necessarily let that deter me, but then I started doing the electrical stuff and enjoyed that quite a bit. So
The sad thing is that, just because a certain type of person does well in a certain type of job, there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. Like, as a friend of mine, and he was a Navy SEAL 28 years, right? He was talking about how they tried to do a little DEI in the teams, right? And he goes, yeah, there's certain body types and certain, ancestries that do really well in the cold, wet environments, and there's some that just do not, right? And so that was just a fact, and he was telling us about their experience with that, and it just did not work out.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I think there should be more,
That's actually funny you say that, because this morning, or actually this afternoon, I was standing out in the driveway with my wife in the sunshine, and I was like, oh, it is so hot out here. And she's like, what?
68.
And I said, it is brutal. I got to get in the shade. And she's like, it's like 67 degrees. And I said, no, bullshit. It's at least 80, because this is brutal. And she's like, no, it's not. And I said, no, stand out here. This is hot. Like, the sun is intense. And she's like, you're crazy. And she pulled up her phone. It was like 68 degrees. I was like, oh, I am apparently a man of northern latitudes.
Put on your Viking helmet and raked the rest of your leaves. Yeah.
But and here's the thing too, though, is that it's funny until they actually start talking about it a lot. Like, you get black dudes and every different race and different creed or whatever or that work for us. I don't even think about him as a black guy.
Yeah,
he's just that's just so and so, right? You don't even think about it. Then all of a sudden it's like they promote to a position, and now it's the first of this that's in this position, and it's like, well, he's the best one for the job. Like, he's the one that earned that job. That's just him. And then they put the spotlight on somebody, which, hey, it's
got to make that person uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that was his thing. Like, these people here have never treated me any different. He was kind of like, but it's just tough. It's a tough thing to navigate. But it's funny because they have this wall, there's this hallway, and it's called the Smoky Joe's. And every fire department's got a rich history. And it was like 18. Shoot, I'm a screw this up, 1892, I think we started. Our local's 46. Well, they have locals in the 4-5 digits now. We were local 46, right? And in this hallway, there's all the way from the original fire chief in the 1800s, his picture on the wall, and every firefighter that's ever passed away is on this wall of pictures. And
On the job, or
no, in history.
Oh, wow.
History. And then there's pictures in the main classroom, all the guys that are on duty now, from the most senior guy, the whole department that's on duty. And then when they retire, they go over to this other wall, and these are all the guys that are alive and retired. There hasn't been that many.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so because people wouldn't leave this job, they'd get this job, and it's such a great job, they'd work it for 25, 30 years, Yeah. But this wall of guys, they look a lot like us, right? And is that bad? Is that wrong that these guys that's the kind of people that did this job and built this department and made it? And so, like I say, I don't think there should be anything saying limit anybody, but I don't think you should also
just be a plain old meritocracy, period.
Exactly.
Don't
limit anybody.
It's weird that a job and a career is, throughout history, no one's ever been like, oh, firefighters are pussies. You know what I mean? Like, firefighters have been rugged. You're running into a burning building, right? That's what everyone thinks. And for a group to be so entrenched with like, oh, we got to fit social normal standards, or like we got to have a quota or this. And it's like, so what is this? This is like bureaucracy of the higher ups, or like of the city council,
It's
or
people
of these
who
things.
are trying for political gain for themselves, and they're using these
entities to
these positions as like
curry
a
favor.
grandstanding moment.
Your soapbox. You're standing on your soapbox and you're screaming that this is something. But you're doing that with, and I guess you could say this for the military, but when lives are endangered, you're taking something as important as the military for protection, the fire service for, aid, as well as safety, and these things that we take for granted, or that most citizens feel that this should be a natural amenity of life. Well, now you're using this as a platform. And now you're costing people response times. You're costing them their safety. You're costing them their lives. And it's sad to see something that takes such strong men, women, all this stuff we're talking about, and you're using it for, I don't know, a vote for a Lexus in your driveway.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just, it's permeated the culture. And I don't necessarily think, there's people that don't necessarily have our best interests or anybody's best interests at heart that are trying to promote a lot of this thing on a very high level. But we've got some kick-ass gals that work for us. We've got some, amazing people. So, I just, like I say, I love my job. I love working for the city. And, as they after they canned me, they took me back. And that's why I really appreciate that they did that. And so it's a whole another story. But
so
hang on.
I got a couple questions though, and let me just take a turn here and say, what's something that you're super proud of that's happened in your career? That like, is there a story or a thing that like particular day that like something happened and you just like really latch onto that as like, this is a cool moment? Because I know a lot of the time things get washed away because there's a lot of things that come through.
Yeah. Gosh, it's so funny. We tell new people, hey, you need to keep a record of your calls, because you could write a book, but you literally will have people say, hey, remember that call where this happened? And you're like, you get so many, and you see a lot of tragedy that you just kind of wiping the hard drive constantly.
Yeah,
because
I read so many military history books when I was in high school and middle school. I told myself I was going to keep a journal when we went to Afghanistan, and I didn't write a single word down.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're busy doing it, and you're like, this is stupid. I wouldn't want to sit there and waste people's time, But yeah, people would find. Actually, a guy just did write a book. It just came out. This guy that was a chief, and it's funny because he named a bunch of names, and I was like, whoa. Yeah, it's called In a Heartbeat, and you can get it on Amazon. And Brian Zelmer was the guy that wrote it. He was a fire chief, and he'd actually gone through some tough things where he was kind of persecuted, I think, kind of unfairly about some some things that had happened, and the administration kind of went after him. But yeah, it's an interesting book.
That's good for him.
Got some Everett Fire Department history in it, but
Right.
yeah, you know, gosh, I think it's just I'm trying to think of any like. You know, we've done a lot of that. You do a lot of cool training. You know, we got to rappel off the Space Needle.
Mm-hmm.
That was really fun. And so we do a lot of really cool training. You know, doing swift water rescue stuff. Actually, one thing I did, I was helpful in is I wanted there to be a rescue swimmer program, and we have technical rescue. So I'm on the technical rescue team. Well, currently I'm off because coming back I had to wait to get back on it. But I've been an instructor so we do rope rescue, trench, confined space, and urban search and rescue. And so we have all these other specialties that we do, but then we didn't actually have a swimmer team. So we had there was an episode at Silver Lake where somebody was out in the water, and we didn't have a way to go out on the water and rescue them. And civilians were on the thing going, why aren't you going to help that person? And they go, well, we don't really have a way to get to them. And so somebody grabbed a canoe from Emery's there and a cookie sheet and paddled out in a canoe and saved this person. So that embarrassed the department enough to where they bought a little inflatable Zodiac to keep out at Silver Lake, right? The great cookie sheet rescue. But they would have issues where like there'd be somebody underwater. If they're down 5 feet, 10 feet underwater, well, our policy wouldn't let us actually go underwater to rescue them. Like you didn't have subsurface rescue. If you went in the water, you had to have a life vest on. Well, you can't get somebody on the bottom of a pool officially. And so there was a kid that had drowned, you know, they lost him at Silver Lake. And so they were in a little boat and they're floating around looking for him. And the one guy looks at his captain and says, hey, I see him. There he is. And then he looks at him and he's like, what do I do? You know?
Wait, what?
And he goes, well, are you going to jump in and get him or am I? But he was like 10 feet down. But our policy was that you couldn't go underwater to rescue somebody.
Please tell me somebody got in the water and got him.
Yeah, he jumped right in and got him.
Yeah,
well, but that's the thing, right? The policy wasn't there. So I was like, this is messed up. Yeah. So I started doing rescue swimmer training. So I went down and took a class they had, and they actually teach you to breath hold, dive down to 35 feet to do water rescue. It's called rapid entry rescue swimmer. Right. So me and another guy went and took this class. I'm like, hey, we need to do this. They're like, yeah, we don't have the budget, or we're not going to do it, or that's too dangerous. I'm like, you're going to send us into a deadly environment, a fire, right, with specialized gear, and we're going to assess the risk and take whatever, risk a lot to save a lot. But yet you're going to say that the water, which is a dangerous environment, you're not going to let us go in and take a risk to save somebody. But it was just unknown to them, right? So then a couple years later, I took another guy down and I went through the class again. And I said, what do I got to do to be an instructor? And they said, well, take the class twice and then you can come help out. And so then we had another group. So we were kind of doing this as the whole thing was, well, these are going to be our water rescue trainers. So we're allowing them to go to this class, but we still didn't have an official position or a policy on it. 10 years went by. Jeez. And finally they said, okay, our union negotiated, we're going to have a rescue swimmer team. And so this is great. But then they said, and I said, okay, cool. And then they're like, but sorry, Weir, you can't be on it. I'm like, what do you mean? They go, well, we've just made a new rule that you can only have one specialty for the union. And so because you're a rescue tech, you can't be a rescue swimmer too. And I'm like, so they said, well, you can give up your rescue tech. And I'm like, so it's kind of funny. So all that worked. But so I'm thankful that I was able to be a part of a whole bunch of really cool people coming together and making that now. They've done a whole bunch of rescues. They've done rescues out off the Everett waterfront, on the Snohomish River.
Yeah, there's a lot of waterways in Everett. It's amazing that the
and
Everett
our
Fire
guys
Department would not have a swimmer team.
Our guys have done tons of water rescues, and it's pretty cool. So it was fun to be. That's something I feel pretty proud of. And nobody's ever said anything about it, and I don't really care. I'm not looking for accolades.
It's awesome.
But that's something I'm proud of.
That's cool, because I see them doing dives out here in Lake Stevens all the time.
Oh yeah, I've trained guys. I've worked as a trainer with Lake Stevens. Our county does a lot of stuff together. So Lake Stevens, Marysville, Arlington, Surfer, which is Snohomish Regional Fire and Rescue, South County. We all train together when it comes to special ops. So I've helped train guys at Lake Stevens, Lake Ty, Martha Lake, and yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
That's super cool.
Did you have more questions?
Yeah. What was? Well, shoot. I mean, you kind of answered it with that.
But we've helped. There's been so many, just being able to be a part, to meet the amazing people that I've worked with there. I mean, so many. It's interesting. Like, you know how you go in different places and you feel like, there's not very many smart people around, or like you're like, gosh, people are not competent. I go there, I'm like humbled by the amazing, when I'm in other areas, you see people and you're out in public and, somebody's broke down the side of the road and nobody can help them fix a tire, or nobody's able to help solve a problem. You see in a supermarket, you see the videos right online all the time. Somebody's hurt or getting attacked, and people are just videoing with the phone, right?
But nobody helps. They just pull out their phone and start.
But I know one of you guys would all probably be the one. I felt like I'm the one to jump in and help, right? But in this group, I'm humbled, man. There's so many people, that are smarter than you, that are stronger than you, that are more talented than you. It's amazing, So it's just an amazing group of people, and I've had some mentors in my career: Rich Schroner, Mike Josephitis, John Tanaka. Bunch of guys that just really, really knowledgeable fire service guys, and it just trained me a lot. So, yeah.
That's cool. So I want to talk about the opioid crisis.
Jeez.
And I'm curious, when did you guys start to sort of recognize it? Was it like a frog in the boiling pot where it came on slowly? Or was there a moment where you guys kind of looked at each other and went, all right, what the hell is going on the streets?
Well, so even just last year, it was heroin. Right, so it's like you kind of learn the street lingo for it. It's like hey
Blues.
man, you doing brown? You doing brown? Oh yeah, doing brown, yeah. So it was heroin. Yeah. Well, then now, it's just all changed in the last couple of years to the fentanyl, and it's just so cheap and so prevalent everywhere. And so now it's like, well, why would I try to find heroin when I can do the fentanyl? It's amazing.
But when did that start for you guys? Like 2010, 15?
Well, you got to remember. So I had a little break in my action. So about 2021 is when they canned me. Was in October, and then 2022.
Right, let's go back 10 years before that. Because when did the opioid crisis start?
Well, so what you had the pills, right? So you had OxyContin and oxycodone.
But you had doctors
right?
go through, and this is something that's never. I've kind of followed this. You've never had in medical history a pain index. When pain was part of, like, if doctors didn't ask you what your pain level was,
10.
Yeah, exactly.
11.
Then they're not doing.
It's always 11 though.
They're not doing their job.
But
this same time was the same time big pharmaceutical companies were pushing these opioid products onto the doctors, onto the hospitals. And it kind of became like religious. People became like religious zealots. Like, and in certain areas like California where they're
in Florida. Remember the pill mills happening in Florida in like 2000?
About 2 years ago, Andy Stumpf had a former pharmaceutical salesman on talking about how they sold all these opiates. During
but it was a humanitarian thing. Like, if I'm in pain and your doctor's not addressing it, he's being an asshole.
They had salesmen encouraging the doctors and giving them false information, telling them, well, they won't get addicted because they're in pain, and you can't. When you're in pain, like morphine or an opiate doesn't make you high until the pain has been subsided. And that's only when you go beyond that it starts. Well, but Brent's laughing. Anyway, but hang on. But that's the message that was sold.
But it's also pharmaceutical companies pushing laws saying that this needs to be done. If you're not addressing pain as a doctor,
pain was
patient,
It was a diagnosis.
It became a new diagnosis.
Immoral.
Yeah,
because they had a product to push.
It also kind of shows how subjective doctors are to, like, hey, this is the new information. You now have to abide by this. And it's like, okay, that's what we're doing.
I've never seen that in the last couple of years. Weird.
Yeah. Sorry, Jordan. I was talking over the top of you.
No, it's okay. Yeah, it was an immoral situation to not allow people to get high, and now it's immoral to let them fucking not be high.
I know.
Now it's immoral to allow people to push people into certain areas when they're, walking the streets and doing crazy shit and telling them, oh, let's just make a fund for the county to allow people to have small burglaries because those people need those things. So let them steal $500 whatever dollars a day worth of stuff because they need it. It's immoral to stop them.
Yeah, no, I know.
Because they're in need.
Yeah. I'm still trying to nail down like a rough time frame of when the opioid crisis really started. Was that like the late 2000, like early 08, 09?
Yes,
Yeah,
I think 2007, 2006, because I remember seeing a documentary that was the pill mills that was happening in Florida, and they'd shop, right? So they'd go to Florida and they'd go to this doctor, and this doctor would prescribe 500 Oxycontin, and then they'd go to the next doctor and they would go get another bag of 500 Oxycontin, and then they would just take those and then distribute them throughout the country. So that was something that was happening in
So for you guys in the early, sort of that mid 2000s, I guess you call it the early 2000s because we weren't into 2010 yet.
It's a weird thing I'm still not comfortable with.
The aughts?
The aughts.
The aughts, yeah.
When did you guys start seeing an uptick in overdoses? Do you recall?
It's hard. I just can't. I don't really feel like.
Was there a point at which you were like, man, we are burning through Narcan like crazy?
Well, no, just recently.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it hasn't been that long ago.
It's been like that for 5 years.
It used to be a heroin overdose. 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Yeah, you'd get them, but it was a pretty rough life, man. If your IV shooting up heroin, there was a lot of diseases, a lot of things. You don't live long. That way. Yep. But when they're smoking this fentanyl, man, they just crush it up.
Yeah,
I can show you a picture of my.
Show us how to do it.
Tinfoil.
Yeah, sure. I brought a straw.
No, they crush it up and then they just we'll take a pen or something or some kind of a little pipe thing and they light it and burn it underneath and they just smoke it out of there. I've seen them smoking it right on the street, but then they, depending on the strength of it, and it suppresses their respiratory drive. But here's the thing that's crazy is that so many people have Narcan now. So what happens is there's no fear of consequences. Like, everybody's got the Narcan.
Yeah.
And so they go down and finally somebody finds a Narcan, or the cops a lot of times will show up faster than us, depending on what's going on. And they'll give them Narcan, and we have our Narcan. And we were called the other day, and we're sitting there, we pull up. It's funny, they have a area, it's West Casino Road and Evergreen Way, and there's this old bank there. And so it's off of West Casino, so they call it the West Bank. It's this shutdown bank, and it's just, that was horrible for a while. And they've been coming in and trying to clear the people out, but there was, there'd be 30, 40 people just on the side of the road doing drugs. But we'll get a call, you come running, jumping out, and the guy's laying there, and they've jammed the Narcan in him, or the cops jammed the Narcan in him for whatever reason. They're waking up or not waking up, and then we give them the Narcan. But sometimes it's getting lately where they haven't been waking up. And it's taken longer and longer. But think, how many times can you go?
Can you code
4, 5, 7, 8 minutes without oxygen to your brain?
Jesus.
Before you turn into a zombie.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally have 3 minutes without oxygen, right? Your brain, you start killing brain cells. And these people, we see them over and over and over, and they won't. They wake up. We're like, hey, we need you to go to the hospital. No. Well, and they won't even say no. It's and they'll go running down the street,
stagger off. Yeah, jeez,
running away, and you're like,
have you Narcan the same person multiple times?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. No,
What's the most?
When you get
Do
to
you
know
have a number?
When you get to know their names and birth dates, like their birthday or their name,
like you're giving them a test when you ask.
No, yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because, in my opinion, to allow somebody to stay in a life of addiction like that and homelessness is not love.
No, it's not.
I don't care. You say, I'm going to give them a clean needle, or I'm going to give them food. You can go in the city of Everett every day of the week, and there is at least 3, if not 5 or 6 places where you can get a meal during the day. So what you're doing is you got these people on the streets.
Purgatory.
They're doing their drugs. They go and somebody gives them a meal, so you allow them to stay on the street. Somebody will give them a place to stay when it's really cold, and you're perpetuating this person's miserable existence in hell.
Yeah.
Like that to me is not love. Love is saying you need to stop.
Yeah.
That you need some consequences. I've had things that have happened to me in my life, and the consequences were such that I said, I'm not going this direction anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a change. And I was happy that I had those consequences, you know?
Well, not only that, but I believe that at the point where they've taken it so far that they've actually killed themselves with drugs, we could probably just take the Narcan off the trucks and out of the police cars, let them go, because their life has reached such a low that it's probably okay it's probably more compassionate to let them go.
Yeah, but I'll never. Our job is to save lives.
Yeah,
we don't discriminate against anybody. I don't care if it's the lowest of the low persons, or overdose 15, 20 times. I'm going to do everything I can to save their life.
Yeah,
that's my job. The mayor and the city pays me a lot of money to do that, and I'm going to do that. Those decisions need to be made at higher levels, and I think it's, I think there's other things that you can do to help those people in other ways.
We have
hopefully before it comes to that point, right? Because nobody wants to see somebody die like that.
We're building a trebuchet.
And I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but you know what I mean? I mean, that's my, there's no, anybody, I don't discriminate against anybody, the lowest of the drug addict. And I've had some pretty nut people in some pretty low places, and we help them out. And we've had people we've helped. One guy that I think they'd seen him like 270 some odd times in 1 year.
Holy shit.
That he'd gone to the ER.
Yeah.
And they have different programs for these people that are these repeat offenders. But
now 5 days a week.
Now they have these low barrier housing units they have in the city where they say, well, instead of having them on the street, let's just shove them in this unit. We'll just pay for all expenses paid here, and then give them a check, give them food, and just let them be here. And they can do their drugs, they can drink, they can do whatever they want, and no consequences.
Good Lord.
They can do whatever they want in there.
Yeah.
And you won't get kicked out.
Where is that?
Oh, there's a bunch of them. Claire's Place. No. These are big, fancy, brand new apartment buildings.
Oh, shit.
Right there on Peck's Drive in Evergreen, by the city, the reservoir there. There's a huge apartment complex.
So
right across from Value Village. That new one they're building. There's Andy's Place, which is on like Lombard and 30th and Lombard, something like that. Big, huge, fancy.
So are these privately owned, and then the city is paying for it for the rent?
I don't know all of the thing, but there's,
I guess either way, taxpayers
public,
are
private.
paying
For it. Oh yeah, you're paying for.
Regardless of how it's structured, it's taxpayer.
And what they do is they make these kitchens with a little stove that has an automatic timer. Like the stove will only stay on. Yeah, it'll only stay on for like 5 minutes.
Thank God. Thanks for paying your taxes,
The countertops are stainless steel, so nothing can get broken, nothing can get damaged. It's almost like a prison kind of.
Good grief.
But you go in them and they still trash these places, and it's just really sad. But
you said earlier that your job is to save these people, and there's nothing else that you'll do. And I agree. That should be the job of a firefighter. It's commendable. It's part of. I think you probably feel it's more of a natural calling at this point, and it's just something you feel you have to do. But you can't say, Tobin was saying, put them in the trebuchet, throw them out to the sea, all that kind of stuff.
To the orcas.
Right.
The orcas are hungry.
That's something for more of our elected officials to do. But to be a person in your situation, to see this stuff, what do we do where a normal person is? I mean, I work in Everett quite a bit, and the shit I've seen change over the last 10 years, 5 years, last 3 years, has changed everything. But over the course of time, Everett has gotten progressively worse, and it's like, so what do we do?
Well, that's the thing I've often said.
Change?
I've often said that if the average citizen knew how people abuse the system, they would be in uproar, but they just don't know that, right? And when we go to this call, 911 call, and somebody goes, I want to go to the hospital. Why? Well, I've got a tummy ache. It's been going on for a couple hours. Okay. Have you tried taking some Pepto-Bismol? No, I want to go to the emergency room.
Have you pooped?
Okay. Yeah. I see 3 cars in the driveway. Is there somebody that can give you a ride to your probably not best thing for you is an emergency room. It's a walk-in clinic or your regular. Nope. I want to go to the emergency room in an ambulance. Oh, yeah. And then a guy comes out of the back room. Hey, what's going on, honey? She's like, go back to bed. I got it.
Good grief.
Somebody there. They don't even ask. And our job, we can't say no.
No kidding.
And so they don't empower you to say no,
Yeah.
right?
So it's a policy.
It's
problem.
a policy thing, and you're, as a company officer on a fire engine or a ladder truck or whatever, you're kind of right in the middle of, the citizens and the administration and all that. You're the one right there addressing that person,
Yeah.
and you need to make that decision. And there's guys that would say, "No, I'm not sending you to the hospital ambulance." No, but you're taking a big risk on, because if that person decides to sue you or report you or something, you could get in trouble. So so the guys that want to save the taxpayer some money by not sending the guy that doesn't need to go, he's the one that is risking his job, or the other guy that just comes in and goes, yeah, give me an ambulance, a taxpayer's expense, $2,000-$3,000 ambulance ride, how many $1,000 emergency room visit. And we get people, we'll see them the same day back out calling us again, still have the ER band on their wrist. They get kicked out of there. They said they go away, and then they want to.
Is that a mental illness that you're seeing, or is this just somebody who's high on authority and they just want to be able to tell people what to do, or
the whole
lonely?
The mystery of mental illness is beyond.
Yeah,
because
what's bad behavior, what's mental illness, what's a brain that's so fried by doing drugs and alcohol for so long that you can't make any rational decisions anymore. I just don't. That's the question of the ages, right?
Or just a shitty person, which seems
or somebody with a bad attitude, or or not taking responsibility for their life.
Growing up, I was always told that there's, go take the ambulance. When the ambulance shows up, go take the ambulance, because there was always the guy who was having a heart attack and he was like, I don't need an ambulance ride. Like, don't get out of here. I don't need you guys to be here. And I was always under the impression that was the case. You guys showed up to somebody who needs an ambulance, and you have to fight a guy because he doesn't want to get on the ambulance because he's like, nah, I'm going to be fine.
Well, that depends, right? That's the older generation. It's the old lady that's like having a heart attack, and she's like, I'm good. You're like, what's your, or she's got her, a compound fracture of her lower legs, right? And you're like, what's your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? Oh, I'm
2.
about a 3, honey. I'll be okay. Just put a splint on it. And then you get the kid that's, 18. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst pain you've ever felt in your life, what's your pain? I'm at 11, man.
Yeah.
I look at him and I say, okay, so if a bear was ripping your arm off, what would your pain level be?
Yeah.
10.
Well, that'd be a 20 on a scale of 1 to 10. It's always 11. I don't even ask that anymore. I look at him and I go, yeah, I'm sure I could guess what they're going to say.
But I mean, that's the thing that the generation is coming up.
Yes.
And
It's a new attitude of entitlement where someone is supposed to take care of this for me.
Exactly.
Somebody is supposed to come here and do something about this, and it's not me.
Yeah,
100%.
And how can I beat the system? How can I work the system? You know, and so it's tough, right? And as
it's the same reason you can't get a good sale on a garage sale anymore, and everything's like full price. It's the same thing.
People rate them early, and then they sell it on offer up.
Damn entitlement that's going on out here. I remember going to the 50-cent sales.
Right? You could buy toys by the pound.
And here we are. People want full price.
Oh, man. All right.
So it's tough. It's a tough thing. But I tell you, there's amazing firefighters in these jobs, and when they go in, they do the best they can to triage and take care of the people. Amazing high training, especially at our department. Highly trained people. And the reason why is that we've had pretty good benefits and a pretty good schedule. And when you give good benefits, a good schedule for people, they want to do that job. And so you get a lot of people that apply and want to do that. But if you start firing people, right, what happens? And we're behind the 8 ball still trying to recover because they lost a lot of people because they had the people they fired, but then there was a bunch of people that said, take the job or you're going to fire me. I've had that shoulder injury that I've been, legitimate.
Yeah.
Might as well take, my retirement now. I've had that knee that's been bugging me, and I was going to maybe work another 2-3 years. And so they lost a whole bunch of people that just said, I'm out and retired, and they still haven't caught up yet.
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
I have a friend who I think it was 2021. He got fired, and this is his first week back.
What did he do?
He's a firefighter.
For
Kirkland.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh, did he? He's going back to Kirkland.
He
Oh,
hired
nice.
back on with Kirkland.
They've been fighting it a long time, and I didn't know what was going on. Oh, good for him.
Yeah. So
That's awesome.
he moved his family
Good for him.
out of the state, and just kind of started working that, and I think he found another firehouse somewhere else, but he got it back on with Kirkland.
Imagine being in your dream job, your dream, and doing the job that you love. You have a passion for, you have a calling for, and then somebody's saying, "Oh, if you don't do this, we're all the work, all the training they put into you, and we're gonna kick you to the curb."
Yeah.
Oh, if you don't do something to your body.
Yeah.
Or imagine they say, do this, and you're like, this doesn't seem right. I don't want to do it. I'll take my chances. And then they come back and they're like, hey, you know what? You're right. Why don't you come on back to us? And you're like, what makes you feel worse? It's like, I was right.
It definitely changes. Like, there's a customer we have at work that I couldn't go there for a while, and now I can.
Yeah.
And it's like, my heart's not in it anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I used to care about doing a good job for that customer.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck.
It's no
It's
respect.
like, you know what? If we're off schedule, if we're over budget, whatever. Fuck you.
But that's fear.
It's not fear. It's when you realize how low their regard for you was.
No, but that's the fear
is.
of that person to be like, if you don't get this shot, I think you're going to kill me. Or if I don't get this shot, I'm going to get fired. And I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
And so
much
fear,
more, so
there's
much
compliance.
There was so much more, I'm going to lose my job than I fear you're going to kill me.
Yeah, there were so many people coerced into taking that didn't want it.
Yep.
And they ended up doing it because they were afraid they weren't going to be able to pay their bills.
But that's all. That's their fear.
I had a young medic working for me. I was a captain out there, and he's like, Cap, I don't know what to do, man. He goes, I got young daughter, special needs. He's got 2 little kids, one special needs. My wife takes care of her. I need my health insurance, and I can't. He wasn't able to shift over because he didn't have a certification at a certain place. And he goes, I don't know what to do. He didn't want to take it. And I just watched this heartache on this guy as he battled in his mind what he was. And thankfully, I was at a place where, I could kind of afford to, do some other things in the meantime. I didn't have kids like that where it was so that, he was in a tougher place than me.
Yeah. Well, it's that whole, 3-year episode is one of the reasons I started training Northwest and why I'm striving towards self-employment so that I don't want anybody telling me what the rules are from here on out and what I can or can't do. I don't want to work in a place where I'm just hoping that some administrator is going to be morally strong enough to stand up to some retarded fucking government measure. You know what I mean?
Well, and there's a lot of that coming in the future.
Oh,
if you look at this whole Fed coin thing that's going into place here in July.
Yep.
So they're going to start saying that certain transactions will have to be going through the certain Fed coin thing. Yep. And I believe it's just the beginning of getting us onto the central bank digital currency.
Yes.
Because it's gonna slowly happen. You're gonna lose your purchasing power. Eventually they'll say turn in your money.
Yep.
1 for 1. Okay, next month you get 90% of your value. Next month 80.
And most people will line up because they'll be afraid. And they'll be, I'm afraid of losing value. This is how I feed my. Nope. And if people don't take a moral stand at this point, we are setting our kids up and our grandkids up and our great-grandkids up for a lifetime of almost, it's going to be servitude and social credit and just being held under a surveillance state. And, man, everybody needs to realize that you're going to die someday. And so giving in to fear for short-term comfort, we're at a precipice right now where we can really fuck up our society if we give in to fear for the sake of short-term comfort. Or all of us who are adults right now need to take on some short-term discomfort in order to secure the future of this country and the sort of the freedoms we have enjoyed growing up, because there are people who want to take that away and they want to make it a control state. And the time is coming very soon where it's going to be now or never.
Preach it.
No.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys know who Drago is, Thomas Zarian.
I don't.
And he was just on the Jocko podcast, and I remember listening to him like when I first started getting into preparedness and stuff and doing some tactical training like 15, 20 years ago. He was a Navy SEAL. He grew up in Poland, and he grew up in Poland after World War II. Right? And so he when the socialists were in charge there, and he just came out with a book, A Pledge to America, and I just bought it on Amazon, and I encourage people to go out and buy it. But he grew up underneath socialism and the communists coming in the Soviet Union, and he was actually put in a Polish prison. And he talks all about this. It was a 5-hour podcast, and it's incredible. But but he talks about how that his dad went into the party, and his mom was Christian and wanted to keep raising him, that way. But his dad went fully with the party, and how the socialists came in, and people could work, but if your job was taking, his uncle made bricks, but his bricks were better than the communist or than the socialist government bricks. So he was taking the work from the government. And so they said, you need to stop making so many bricks because you're taking work.
There's a book about that called Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
Exactly that scenario.
Exactly. And so they ended up smashing, the anti-fascists back then came in and smashed all his equipment, and they kept doing it until they ran him out of business. Yeah. But Drago ended up going into a Polish, he was a political prisoner. But then when the Pope John Paul came in and solidarity and all that, and they released him, he came to America, and then he ended up becoming a Navy SEAL.
Oh shit!
And he's a really cool dude.
Interesting.
So yeah, I'd encourage people to check out his story. But the thing that was so interesting listening to that is hearing the similarities of today of what's going on.
Yeah.
The public pressure and stuff, and how they enslaved people with socialism.
Yeah, man.
But that's used through fear.
Don't even start, Mike Zedong. We will fuck you up.
I'm gonna break this bottle over your head.
All right.
So we're closing in on 2 hours. So that would actually be a great point to sort of segue into what we're going to be doing with Training Northwest in the future. Is I've really been wanting to bring first aid training online, and I think Brent is going to be the guy. He and I have talked unofficially, and with all of his first responder experience, he's probably going to start taking the lead role in the first aid training out at Training Northwest, whether he does it under his own name and we sort of work as a partnership, or however we work it out. I'm really excited to have like someone, because our buddy Dave has been doing it, but he's down in Eastern Oregon, so he has kids and family and a job and whatnot, so having someone local who's able to take on that role is pretty awesome. And I think that, I don't know, is there anything you want to say about first aid training to the general public?
Yeah. Would you mind if I talk about my podcast and Project 223 a little bit?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So I'm getting into preparedness and all this, and doing some shooting. I wasn't a combat veteran, right? I was on, our weapons on the sub were, hey, if anybody attacks, grab a big wrench and smack them, right? But we did carry a 45 when we were overseas, when we were on watch, so that was kind of cool. But I'm like, what's this,
we have somebody else who carried a 45, and she handed it like that. So she's learning as well.
Nice. So, but then I started doing my own preparedness and stuff, and so, I've done taken classes and shooting, and I enjoy building rifles and all kinds of stuff, and got my NRA rifle and pistol and CCW instructor creds and stuff. But yeah, I started getting more into like the, food preparedness and medical and comms and stuff, and started building a group of people that we do a bunch of training. But at our church, I was talking to our pastor one time, and I was like, hey, it was kind of back with the BLM and all the riots and all that was going on, and everybody's kind of freaking out. And I go, hey, what would happen if the, trucks weren't making it to the grocery stores and we didn't have enough food on the shelves? I go, what would we do for like the people in our congregation? And my friend Billy Wheeler with Calvary Chapel Everett, awesome guy. He's our pastor. He's also a police chaplain, and he's a great dude. But we were talking, and he goes, gosh, I don't know. And I go, we should start doing preparedness training for the people in our church, so that if stuff goes bad, people don't show up like, help us, we don't have anything. They can take care of themselves. They can come here, and then we can try to be a strong group that can help other people. Yeah. They're secure, they're safe, and now we can be an asset to our community. So we started teaching classes, and one day he comes to me and he goes, yeah, we should call our class, we should call it Project 223. And he goes, Proverbs 22:3? And I go, well, I don't know what is it? He goes, it's the wise man sees trouble and prepares, but the fool keeps going and suffers. And he goes,
perfect.
22-3. He goes, get it? 2-2-3. And I go, yeah, I get it. So we started teaching classes. And my first one was bug out bag. Let's talk about bug out bags. There was like 40 or 50 people there, and it was awesome. And people, and so I had like 5 hours of material. I didn't really realize it, when I went over, but I took a couple hours when I'm, teaching people how to, and people just ate it up. And so we did a food supply class, we did medical, we did comms, and we'd do operations where people would go out in groups with their radios and make comms back and forth. And so we've got this church of people that are all really getting into it. And so it's just kind of grown. And then I decided doing a podcast. And so I started doing interviews with friends of mine and stuff. And I brought you guys a little gift here. So it's a from the Project 223 swag. You guys will have to fight for there's a hat and a couple shirts. I think I got a large and an extra large.
Thank you so
and then
much.
threw the hat at me. I'm claiming.
And then these are little survival kits that we did an expo over in Idaho, and
This is by survival kit. He means this is the Narcan.
It's it's just a starter kit. It's got your little flint and stuff in there, but it's just the whole mission of the podcast is to help people prepare to be more self-reliant, right?
Oh, this is awesome.
This is amazing. Apparently,
This is awesome.
we're slacking over here.
I'm not sure if you need a bigger size. I can get if there's a.
We need to be.
But yeah, so I try to do cool interviews with people and do some training. We do some ladies pistol class. I know you guys do those too, but I'm excited to be able to work together with you guys because you got a cool facility. We got a like-minded vision as far as helping people be ready to, be self-reliant. They're not going to depend on somebody else for your security. We're not going to let our country be taken over by people that don't have our best interests at heart, as far as when it comes to freedom and liberty, and people that have the ability to live the life they want to live. So the Constitution's there for a reason. The Bill of Rights is there for a reason. And so I think we need to make sure that we're willing to step up and do our part and not leave it to our kids, a crappier world than we got. We had the ability to grow up and make decisions and do what we wanted to do in life, but then to see people starting to get fired for, not taking a certain medical procedure and stuff. I mean, that's not right. Yeah. So we need to step up. So anyways, I'm excited to be a part with, however we can work together and, have a like-minded vision and stuff. And, so we just, things are growing, things are going good. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah. So I think that is a perfect note to wrap up on. And Brent's podcast is called Project 223, correct? Or
Yes, it's on. Yeah, you can get it on Apple or that might be the Project 223.
Okay. And is there a website that goes along
with
it?
Yep, project223.com. And if you go there's a little link you can click with the headphones and that'll take you to the website page on Podbean or.
What episode are you on? How many have you done?
Geez, I'm on season 2, and I think it's probably like 30 or something, or 20 or 30. Not long. I've just only been going for like a year and a half, and it's just.
Yeah, but you got a good backlog where people can listen.
I'm
catch up. Yeah, I want to listen.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's some are better than others, but to me, it's cool to be able to. I just enjoy it. Like it's fun to do something that you enjoy.
It's the best,
and to be able to share nuggets with people and interview cool people. Like to me, I have the kind of an unsung hero series that I'm doing, where it's like cool people. Like I interviewed this guy. His name's Dr. Scott, and he's this medical doctor, totally into preparedness and training and stuff. And really cool guy. And so I did an interview with him and stuff. And
awesome.
And another guy, friend of ours, was in Special Forces, Army, and
Bryce.
Bryce has a training company, Intrepid Tactics, and so he's a good dude. And so I've interviewed him and some other guys. So yeah.
But as much as it's for like you're like, I'm going to create something for other people to listen to, and maybe this will be entertaining. The most rewarding thing is like my selfishness of what I take away from it.
Oh, I love it. It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think when you have an exchange of ideas like this and you can sit and talk about these things, it makes you think.
Yes.
You have to generate that. I have to think about it, and then you speak it out, and then it helps you. Yeah, where do I stand on
formulate
this?
your thoughts and really dive deeper and understand how you think, why you think that, and if it's valid. I agree, 100%.
But it's funny, just meeting with you guys in person the first time, I've probably listened to 10 hours, what have you, more than that, of you guys talking.
Shame on you.
And then I meet you and I'm like, oh, they don't,
Jordan,
they
sorry.
look different. They look shorter in person.
We're all more handsome. Exactly.
That's my
But it's fun. But it's funny because you feel like I feel like I know you because I hear you guys go back and forth in the sense of humor and all that. And it's like actually you kind of get to know somebody through that medium. So it's a cool thing.
It's interesting.
It's a lot of fun. And that's, Mike and I have said this a couple times on here, and I said it after Greg and I did one of the first episodes of his show. I was like, man, I don't care if anybody listens to this. It's just a lot of fun to sit down and have a focused conversation with people because that's something that's being lost in society. So,
Well, hey, if I could say one more thing.
yeah.
And this is pretty cool. You talk about people listening, right? I've got a couple people. I've got some friends. Or I shouldn't say friends. I've got listeners that actually send me some money on Patreon now. I'm like,
Oh, geez.
whoa, are you serious? That's crazy. And then the guy emailed me and sent me a really encouraging email. And these people are like, hey, we want to do this same thing that you did for our church, right? And so, and being, I'm a Christian man, and so there is that aspect of, I don't hold people's, you don't have to have the same beliefs as me to listen or to be a friend of mine or whatever. But we do kind of come at it from a Christian viewpoint, but it's do unto others as you'd have them do unto you.
Yeah.
Treat others like you want to be treated, and that's kind of the main focus. If you think that way, then you're a friend of mine, right? And believe in freedom and liberty for people to live the way they want to live. But I got a couple people sending me things saying, hey, we want to do this for our group, and it can be for a church or a group. But I'm putting together a book actually, where I have a checkoff manual, and then there's skills modules, so that somebody can take this to a church or to their small group, and they can start their own Project 223 group, right? Preparedness training. And so it's got medical, it's got comms, it's got self-defense, it's got personal family preparedness, and it's pretty cool.
Do you have a title for it yet, or is it still
This
just in
is
the
the Project 223
Oh, there you go.
group preparedness plan.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
and
do you have a schedule for publishing it?
it's coming out this year, hopefully.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Sometime. But I will
so where
say,
should they follow
I
you?
got an email from a guy, and he's like, yeah, I'm doing my first thing at my meeting at my church, and he goes, would you review my notes? And he had all this stuff from my podcast that he was going to share with this big group of people that he had messaged me, and that was so, like, for me, I was just humbled and honored. I was just like, wow. You talk about, people maybe not listening, but you guys joke about not having listeners, right? But I was listening to you all day today on my
There's
podcast.
14 of them.
All right.
Yeah.
But the same thing, right?
They're
But
all burner phones sitting
have
at Mike's
somebody-
house. But
Yeah, thank you, 12.
yeah, to have somebody like that to send you an email that cared enough to say, hey, I can't wait for the book to come out. And I'm like, it was really cool. So it's
See,
rewarding.
but you're much
That
more
sounds awesome.
commendable. If someone wrote a book about the things that I've said, I would cry on the inside.
Oh, God. It would
No.
just, if someone
be a
wanted to
bunch of
publish
swear
something from
words.
our podcast, it would be one of those flip calendars where you tear the pages off and it's just a stupid poop joke.
Don't
Bad
sell yourself
advent
short.
calendar.
Don't
Yeah.
sell yourself short.
Oh,
We're
man.
having a good time though. This is great.
Yes,
Everything,
thank
and
you so
It's
much.
allowing us to meet people like you, and
I love listening to you guys' podcasts. It's fun.
appreciate
Good.
that.
We appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, guys. I think we're going to wrap it up right here because we're at the 2-hour mark and my butt is sore. So thanks for listening.
Mine is too.
Yeah.
How about Jordan? Is yours?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, okay.
Save
We're
that
all
for the
sore,
next
but-
one.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. Hey, if you're enjoying the show, go to iTunes or Spotify and leave us a review.
Yeah.
Because that helps now that we're no longer in our brand new fresh 90-day window. We sort of get put at the bottom of the pile as people are randomly sifting through podcasts to listen to. So the more reviews we get, the more we get pushed in front of potential new listeners. So we would very much appreciate you guys going over there and leaving us a review. All right. Bye, everybody.